All right, Twin Peaks people, I'm going to give everyone about 4 minutes to show up. I just wanted to tell you guys, please chat during this. It's going to be bumpy. I certainly don't have anywhere near all of my media ready to go. Um, and I am hoping that you guys will throw in questions or comments either about the last video or about what I'm saying as I'm saying it. In a real way, you guys are a test market for me. I'm really going way out there with this theory. And it's hard for me. I assume most of you saw my video this morning where I was talking about this. And honestly, I still haven't been able to say the stuff that I really want to get to. It just sort of all combines into this sort of crazy idea that I have that I don't even know that I'll be able to actually get to tonight. I'm hoping that everything just kind of comes together and I can say what my idea about this whole thing is. But in the meantime, I've got some really, I think, great stuff on Twin Peaks, and stay with me for as long as you can stay with me. All right, so it's 9:16. It's been about a year since I created the first video. I was in a completely different place. It's been an absolute crazy year. Right now, I have no job, no house, no vehicle. I'm in a friend's house who is being kind enough to put me up while I try to finish all of this and figure out what's next with my life. Everything seems to have kind of come down to this. And I don't mean this video, this live stream, just this point in my life. If for some reason you're watching this and you didn't watch the previous video, a couple of weeks ago, I was putting the finishing touches on the script for this video, and it's about 90 minutes all told, and it'll be probably longer than that tonight as I fumble and try and show you things. I have a monitor right here. But one of the ideas that I'm trying to get to has to do with quantum mechanics and with the nature of time and reality and how it affects us in our real life, because I think that Twin Peaks has a lot of these elements in it, and at the very least it makes it easier to talk about some of this stuff. But it's kind of weird and esoteric, but I had this traumatic event early on in my life that I'll talk about later. But since then, I have this like PTSD type reaction whenever there is a mass shooting. And I came up with this idea after some events in 2016, which I'll get to, that that these ripples of PTSD echo both ways through time in a quantum sense. And when you look at quantum mechanics, that's not the craziest idea in the world. It's not measurable. It's something you feel. We'll talk a little bit about this. Don't worry, it doesn't get too technical, I don't think. But basically I had this kind of vision of the time period that the Orlando shooting, what was then the biggest mass shooting in the United States, was, and I had this vision of a nuclear explosion, and this was, you know, before the return, and I sat bolt upright in bed with the thought that this is real. So I was writing about this, and you'll see how it kind of all fits together with Twin Peaks when we get there. And then as soon as I finished writing it, I closed my notebook. I made this little video about what my plan was to do, and then I picked up my phone and I read the headline about the shooting in Odessa, Texas, and it was shots fired at Twin Peaks. And if you look at the thumbnail of this video, it uses an image of Twin Peaks, the restaurant, which is like Hooters, I guess, in Odessa, Texas, where there was just a killing with an assault weapon where 7 people were killed. So I'm going to get all the way back around to that. We're going to start in the world of Twin Peaks with just Twin Peaks, not weird stuff. I mean, well, Twin Peaks is pretty weird, but here we go. The one part of the video that is finished.
can be said, no.
Everything I say is a mystery. Is it a real-world idea about a creative work? Is it a creative idea about a real-world work? Is it both? Firewalk with me. 1 year later. Over a year ago, I claimed that David Lynch and Mark Frost fractured the realities of Twin Peaks beginning with Season 2, Episode 10, and created a pattern that was a clue to unlocking the larger mystery. Little did I know at the time how incredible this journey would become. I'm going all in. Though just about everything in Twin Peaks has more than one explanation, I'm going to reveal the most meaningful identities of Judy and Billy and Richard and Linda. I'll explain the deeper esoteric meanings of 430, and I think I've cracked the plane's window code in a way even a professional cryptologist couldn't. Believe it or not, this is only the beginning. I'm going to reveal at least one brilliant puzzle that's been hiding in Twin Peaks since before the pilot. I might even be able to explain the symbology of the owl cave symbol and the ring in a way that will make Robert Langdon jealous. At this point, I feel like I found one of Willy Wonka's golden tickets, or you might say golden shovels, and there might be more meaning to shovel yourself out of the shit than you've imagined. I've been stuck in the Black Lodge for far too long, and I have no desire to get stuck again, so this will be my last Twin Peaks video, if I finish it. Maybe this will be my last Twin Peaks video ever. But I do hope that I'm opening door to an even larger quest for you to explore. We're going to pull back the curtain, but I don't think you'll be disappointed when you see the wizard's magic behind the scenes. I have to warn you now, the ending will be crazy and controversial cliffhanger, even by Twin Peaks standards. Once you see all this, once we get to the bottom of the rabbit hole, if there is such a thing, I guarantee you, you will never be able to unsee it. From this point forward, it should be assumed that everything I say should be qualified with I believe, I think, or what if. And that goes both for Twin Peaks and for the other stuff that I'm going to say. It would just be tiresome if I kept saying I think. It just assume that everything is my theory or I believe. I'm absolutely certain about some connections, and I know others are a stretch. In the interest of time and flow, I will say things definitively. For example, Judy is not really an ancient spirit called JUDY, as much as I think Judy is clearly a reference to Judy Garland. Who am I kidding? I know Judy means Judy Garland, but you get my point. It's clear that Lynch derives much of his inspiration from synchronicity. And I'm going to play this clip of David Lynch from The Art Life, which is a documentary which he did right while he was developing Twin Peaks.
I think every time you do something like a painting or whatever, you go with ideas, and sometimes the past can conjure those ideas. And color them, even if they're new ideas, the past colors them.
So that documentary is great, and there's a couple little pieces that we're going to use from it. I highly recommend watching it, but it really gives you an insight into David Lynch's creative process. And it's clear that he operates by synchronicity. An example from the show is just the throwing the rock at a bottle scene. It's just waiting for these synchronistic events to kind of occur and you find meaning in them. Some references have multiple layered meanings, like metaphors in general. This is the secret sauce that keeps the show compelling on multiple viewings. But all of the biggest mysteries in the show might just align into a single mind-blowing conclusion. I mean, literally, some people won't believe it, and others... This thing is long, so if you're watching it at home, sit on the couch and watch it on TV. If you're watching on a phone, I'm sorry, it's going to go on a while. But you know, the finished version, if I ever get to it, will be still, you should sit down and watch it at home. So I'm going to move pretty fast. Try to give me your full attention. So here we go. There are many mirrors in Twin Peaks, both literal and metaphorical. In Firewalk with Me, Gordon uses a secret code, and this is going to be like the entire night, me kind of stumbling and trying to find these things. Yeah. Gordon uses this secret code to communicate with Agent Desmond. Now, there's an intentional parallel scene to
Trade
this
chic.
in The Return. And you can see, Lynch, I wrote, Lynch wants to see if you've been paying attention. This is not for Albert. This is for us. David Lynch repeats themes from other films throughout his movies. For example, there's a clip in Sunset Boulevard with a mirror that mirrors both that and Audrey waking up at the end of The Return Part 16. The Wizard of Oz is perhaps the most obvious and was clearly on his mind when he and Frost first created the show. Twin Peaks, like all of Lynch's works, has a lot to say about dreams. And I have a dream montage where they say dream a billion times. In fact, if the mystery behind the original series was who killed Laura Palmer, the question of The Return is, who is the dreamer? And then, we are the dreamer who lives inside the dream, yeah. So, right before Twin Peaks, David Lynch made Blue Velvet, starring Kyle MacLachlan. The female lead is named Dorothy and lives in a dream world, or should I say a nightmare. Right after filming the Twin Peaks pilot, Lynch directed Wild at Heart, which features, I caught it at the beginning, nice, thanks for putting on the show tonight. You're welcome, everyone. Thank you, guys. Should I say Nightmare? Right after filming the Twin Peaks pilot, Lynch directed Wild at Heart, which features Cheryl Lee, Laura Palmer herself, as Glinda the Good Witch. And this I actually have. Oh, I like that too. But yeah, here's Laura.
Fight for your dreams.
So there's Cheryl Lee as Glinda the Good Witch in Wild at Heart, which he filmed right after the pilot before he started shooting the series of Twin Peaks. There's an important distinction with Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet. The reference is to Judy, not to Dorothy. In the original series, there are only 3 Hollywood references in Twin Peaks that I could find. They are fundamental to the theme of the series, though. One-Eyed Jacks, isn't that a Marlon Brando Western? I think that's in one of the first couple episodes. And, of course, Judy is all over it. And at the very end, Garland Briggs, as he's kind of coming down, starts saying, Judy, Garland, that's a weird name, Judy, and he just straight up says it. And then, of course, there's a couple of different references to Marilyn Monroe. This video, The Dark Side of the Rainbow, surrounds secrets our society was not really too ready to discuss openly in 1990, maybe not even today. Movies and works of art in general are a mirror of our real world, light and dark. They abstract us from real life so that we may examine the reflections of ourselves at a distance. No one has ever accused Twin Peaks of being lighthearted entertainment. The central theme of Twin Peaks is about the abuse of women, the tragic effects of that abuse, and the demons passed on through cyclical generational sexual abuse. It was an open secret in Hollywood that Marlon Brando, one of the most famous movie stars of all time, was extremely abusive towards women. Only after his death, after Twin Peaks went off the air, actually, did we really know the full extent. But Judy Garland was the original poster child for the dark side of Hollywood, and that stayed hidden for many years. Actually, there's a statue of famed Hollywood mogul Louis Mayer, the original Harvey Weinstein, beckoning to 16-year-old Judy Garland, the girl he'd groped, to come sit on his lap. And they just removed the statue in 2017. Like, you have to Google that. The Judy Garland statue, and he's like, come here, little girl, and, you know. The public's fascination with the mystery surrounding Marilyn Monroe's tragic death began to bring public attention to the plight of the Hollywood starlet, but people continued to turn a blind eye to the dark side of movie magic. Mulholland Drive has a lot of those themes. Monroe was essentially traded between powerful men, and both Marilyn and Judy struggled with the resultant drug addictions that would ultimately claim their lives. In the end, both were killed by their demons. Mulholland Drive, which originally was conceived as a TV spin-off for Audrey, is about the split realities of a disassociated young actress in Hollywood. She begins to wake up from her delusion after an incredible performance by Rebecca Del Rio, by the way, who performs No Stars in the 10th episode of The Return, which is a key moment. But sexual abuse causes disassociation, which causes a lack of connection in a person's thoughts, memory, and sense of identity. Once called multiple personality disorder, it fractures oneself, literally causing people to feel like they are living in a dream or watching themselves in a movie. This is actually the diagnosis. This is what the symptoms actually are. There's an irony in that not only do so many fans have such a light-hearted enjoyment of Twin Peaks, but that one of the most popular children's movies of all times is itself perhaps a subconscious allegory for sexual abuse, the whole Poppies thing and all that. You write what you know, I guess. I mean, Judy Garland was literally groped by the Munchkins. How sick is that? Twin Peaks is, on another level, a never-ending dream of these demons created by sexual trauma and abuse, and it's been that since the start. It's also a meditation about our inability to intervene, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel. All right, this is going to be really choppy. This is the section where I actually do have a good bit of the video supporting it, but it's going to go back and forth, and sorry for the lack of flow. Later, I'm just going to plow through it. Twin Peaks is not just a dream, but a dream within a dream within a dream, like the movie Inception. All the characters in this fantasy world live in the imagination of at least one unseen dreamer who is creating the story in her mind, using characters and actors she herself sees on television in our real world. All of these characters are ultimately a projection of her mind, but more than anything, she sees herself as the heroine of this world, and that would be Audrey Horne. Now, you might suppose that Audrey is the dreamer from that otherworldly story arc in The Return, where she's off in this weird place, maybe awakening from a coma after the bank explosion in the season 2 finale. But Audrey being the dreamer is not some kind of retcon. This isn't something they thought of after the fact. It's clear from the first moment we see her on screen in the first episode. Yes. Leah says, I feel like Nadine watching Dr. Amp right now. You have no idea, dude. I feel like I am Dr. Amp. Like, you should see my other videos. Good grief. So here we've got Audrey's introduction. So first thing to notice, Audrey is actually wearing the red room on her outfit. Her top and her bottom are the same colors as chevron. If you take and you blur those colors, the pink and the brown, the chevrons aren't black and white. They're actually kind of a pink and a chocolatey brown color. And if you look at the skirt she's wearing and the top she's wearing, those are the two colors of the chevron patterns. Her jacket, now I'm kind of caught in between. Her jacket is the green and brown of the chairs, and her shoes, shown incredibly obviously in this insert shot, are the black and white of the Venus de Milo statue and Cooper's suit. Now, when she arrives at school, in a moment, she switches from her black and white saddle shoes into her iconic red pumps, just like Dorothy traveling from her real life into her dream world. In fact...
Right.
In fact... Audrey lets us know this isn't quite reality.
Here.
Audrey has always been the primary projection of the girl inside a dream, but there's always been a dreamer outside the show we were watching. When you rewatch the show in the context that it is a dream, with Audrey being the central character who's avoiding the harsh reality of real life, it becomes overwhelmingly obvious. The dreamer has disassociated. In the late 80s, importantly, disassociation was called multiple personality disorder. She has fragmented her personality into many characters within characters. Twin Peaks exists so that she could wall off the part of her mind that carries the devastating revelation that her father was her abuser. In the show, she's a self-aware and manipulative sexpot, but she's still a virgin. And later, she hides that part of herself from her father at One-Eyed Jacks. As is the mechanism of disassociation, she has hidden or killed the part of herself that knows her father is abusing her, and dreams up a brilliant, kind, perfect secret agent to come save her, who very importantly was never supposed to find out who the killer was.
Escape. I got a better idea. A tall, dark, and handsome stranger falls madly in love with me, takes me away to a life of mystery and international intrigue.
You mean the FBI agent?
Were you a friend
friends with Laura Palmer?
Not exactly. Not exactly. Not exactly.
Listen to these lines together, right after each other.
He's got emotional problems. Runs in the family. Do you like my ring?
This, importantly, is the first mention of a ring in Twin Peaks, perhaps the most important symbol of the show. Later in the episode, Audrey is in her dream world, dressed, again, in black and white, dancing Audrey's trance for the first time. Not in the diner, that's the next episode. Watch how she avoids eye contact with her father, who is essentially trying to wake her up from the dream. Look, so she's not actually even though he's walking in front of her, she's looking out, lost in her dream. Alright. The music from Audrey's dance is practical in her presence. She can turn it on and off, but it also exists as the soundtrack of the show. And then, in arguably the most famous scene from Twin Peaks, she's back in her red room colors again. Oops. Hold on.
Did Laura ever talk about my father? What do you mean? No. What do you mean? I used to sing to her. God, I love this music. Isn't it too dreamy?
Too dreamy, right? So Audrey spends a lot of time, like Alice in Wonderland, lost between worlds. The whole series, actually, she spends a lot of time doing that. The off-screen dreamer who might also, the off-screen dreamer might also have a brother who was abused. Peter Pan syndrome is a symptom of boys who are abused as children. If Johnny actually has a Peter Pan book at one point. One of the few times in the show Audrey gets emotional, the only time she gets emotional with anything having to do with Laura at all, is when Leland is projecting his pain through dancing. I don't have the clip pulled, but, you know, Leland starts kind of going crazy and dancing, and she's watching Leland and starts just breaking down as if she's starting to see through reality. It's like Laura is Audrey's alter, Leland is Ben's, and they're all sort of starting to come together in that scene. And at that point, Ben shouts, "Get him out of my life!" And then Audrey breaks down. The mirrors in the scene returns. Everyone's kind of doing these weird dances in that scene. And it's very, very similar to the scene from The Return right before she wakes up. It actually is this perfect kind of parallel of the two. In this moment, the dreamer is starting to see that Leland is her father. Reacting to that, Audrey, seeking sexual comfort, goes to Cooper's bed, who, as the idealized version of her father figure, virtuously refuses and supports her. Like literally, she leaves from that event, goes and finds Cooper, and wants to give herself to Cooper, who is honorable. Later at One-Eyed Jack's, perhaps the most memorable moment in the series, Audrey, the sexpot virgin, ties a cherry stem in a knot with her tongue, synchronistically forecasting the time loop in which we're caught. Now, pay attention to this. This next sequence is one of the most important in the entire series. So, what the heck is up with this hunchback, first of all? Weird. I mean, lots of stuff in Twin Peaks is weird, but that's especially weird.
Close your eyes. This is such stuff as dreams are made of.
This is such stuff as dreams are made of. And then we fade to her idealized father again. So this is the moment where Audrey's reality breaks. It doesn't cut, it fades to Cooper. After the break, between seasons, we find out that Cooper survives. So, oh, wait. This is the moment where Audrey's reality breaks. It doesn't cut, it fades to Cooper's room, and then immediately, right after that, I guess I should probably pull that up, this is right before Cooper is shot. So after, like, immediately after Audrey realizes it's her dad, Cooper goes into the room and boom, that's when he's shot. This is the scene where he's shot. It's the end of the series. This happens. She sees it's her dad. Cooper gets shot. Leo has been shot at the same time. Remember this. So after the break between seasons, we find out that Cooper survives. Her image of her ideal protector using his bulletproof vest, just like Audrey survives by using a mask. Now, this is really one of the most important scenes in the series. So here's the thing. You can see that she's in this room with red curtains and flowered wallpaper. Now, if you've been paying attention, I'm going to start reading my script other than freewheeling. A projection of the Dreamer's Room. It appears in Firewalk with Me and The Return as the key location of the realization for Laura and Annie. In this key scene, she literally puts on the mask of Laura Palmer to block her mind from her father's advances. There's that great shot, and it's in here somewhere, where she's just, you see the point of view of Audrey looking through the mask at Ben, and it's just so perfect. Where is it? Anyway, it's in here somewhere. All right. So there's the man behind the mask. Okay, so this is Audrey's moment of disassociation. It's time tied in a knot, revisiting this moment of abuse over and over again. Audrey actually spends quite a good deal of time at One-Eyed Jack's. There's some dialogue here that kind of plays along with this. Now, the scene following all of this in the series is Maddie's vision of Bob. So, a new fractured incarnation of Laura on the mask is created to be sacrificed in order to keep the truth of her father away. Audrey's dream is in danger of falling apart. She finally gets Agent Cooper on the phone, reacting like an idealized father. This is no time for games. Come home now. Cooper finally comes back to rescue Audrey from One-Eyed Jack's. Look at the decor. I did not pull that clip, I do not think, which is unfortunate because we need that one. All right, guys, we're going to have to find that clip. So if that's episode 1, oh, right, but then there is. She's stuck on for several episodes. I'll find it, I promise. It's at the end of one of the episodes. Is it 3? Is she still stuck in 3? Sorry. I didn't have my little quote pulled already. This is behaving very slowly, of course. Alright, well, I'm just going to go ahead and read it. We'll have to pull the clip later, but when Cooper comes to rescue her, it's the most profound picture of the Red Room. It's a great visual. It's got all of the elements of the Red Room at One-Eyed Jack's. It has the flowered wallpaper and the red, but it also has a little statue and the gold thing on the desk. It's all of the parts of of the Red Room right there when Cooper rescues Audrey from One-Eyed Jack's. When she does wake up, the first thing she says is, "Daddy, can you see me?" And then when he does see her, she's, her line is, "I'm aware of a lot of new things too, Daddy." Now, of course, in the literal world, she knows a lot about Ben Horne and all of this, but it's really operating on another level. It should be clear at this point. All the manifestations of Maddie, Laura's doppelganger, is an attempt to keep Audrey's mental dam from breaking. Sorry. Oh, there's these the idea that Laura wrote, "Someday I'm going to tell the world about Ben Horn. I'm going to tell them who Ben Horn really is." So, right as Cooper comes to the realization, Audrey opens the door. He was sleeping with. Hold on, sorry. Okay, so this is the part where Maddie is being killed. Like everything, right? Sorry. So I have all of this playing out in clips, and I don't have it edited together for you, so I'm trying to have to describe it. Basically, all of these characters know something is wrong. That Margaret, something is happening, isn't it, Margaret? And they're all sitting at the at the roadhouse, and they can all tell because that's all the personalities in the dreamer's head starting to sort of have this terrible realization. And this is the moment that the sort of sacrificial shard, Maddie, is killed to try and desperately keep this secret at bay. And it's that the dreamer's father is the one molesting her. The world spins. It's interesting to note, I don't know if you know this, it's interesting to note that Lynch actually shot Maddie's murder with both Richard Bamer and Ray Wise. Both Ben and Leland killed Maddie, effectively. As a matter of fact, in all of the scripts for the series following that point where, Leland is revealed to be the killer, it actually says Ben in the script, not Leland. And okay, so in the last episode of season 2, the original series finale, there's this whole thing with Donna and Ben being her father. It's like the series sequence has repeated again. And if you'll notice, when Ben gets run into the fireplace, he basically ends the series in exactly the same place that Leland was when he died. He's got blood coming down from his forehead in exactly the same way. It's sexual secrets. Donna's looking for these secrets. Ben's there and then gets run into the fireplace, just like Leland against the wall. And again, that was happening concurrently with Audrey and the explosion of the secret box in the bank. Anyway, going back to the middle of season 2, Lynch and Frost were compelled to reveal the killer, and that subverted their artistic intentions. But this was far more than an arbitrary desire. The story of Audrey Horne and Laura Palmer were the projection of an abused woman who compartmentalized her trauma in order to keep herself sane, to survive. Like Norma Jean in Maryland, as a physical manifestation of this break, the dreamer, whoever that is dreaming the fictional world of Twin Peaks to escape the nightmare in her head. This cycle of Twin Peaks may be manifesting as something like bipolar disorder. As that demon rises to the surface, that wound is reopened, the monster is unleashed, and the cycle repeats. The history of the trauma cannot be undone. The past dictates the future, but perhaps there's a way to rebalance the cycle. Lynch makes it clear that's the goal in the first episode of The Return. Shadow, take me down for the last time, for the last time. Twin Peaks is very meta. On its surface, it's a soap opera that knows it's a soap opera. Invitation to Love is the soap within a soap that mirrors the events happening on the show. When Leo is shot on TV, he watches the character Chet get shot at the same time. In fact, the entire idea of the show being inside a dream, inside a character's head, outside the show itself, seems to be borrowed from another groundbreaking show from TV history, St. Elsewhere. In its controversial ending, which aired while Twin Peaks was in development, it's revealed the entire show takes place in the mind of an autistic boy. In the very first episode of Twin Peaks, we see Audrey's presumably autistic brother staring into a small dollhouse, just like that kid in St. Elsewhere was staring into a snow globe, imagining this fictional world inside a small building inside a snow globe. In that first episode, we see Audrey, right as Audrey's world is falling apart, at the first cycle of Twin Peaks is ending, she points us to a secret that's lain hidden for 28 years that's about to blow this whole thing wide open. There's a quote. She has Cooper on the phone, and she says, "I saw you on the TV. You look like a movie star." Whoever the dreamer is, they're certainly a fan of movies. It's Starbucks tonight. Sorry. Movies have long been associated with dreams. In fact, famous film editor Walter Murch posits that the standardized 24 frames per second of films mimics dreams, triggering a dreamlike state in us, and we're entranced. In the movie of Twin Peaks, like films, I'm sorry, if the movie, when I'm talking about the movie, the whole show is shot on 24 frames per second film. If it's David Lynch's dream, in one way, he is the dreamer, clearly influenced by other works. While developing The Return, David Lynch was the subject of an excellent documentary, The Art Life. There's this Easter egg shot in The Art Life. Did I already pull it? That's unfortunate. Oh, maybe it's here. Ah, yes. There's this Easter egg shot in The Art Life, where on the legal pad you can actually see the central theme of Twin Peaks. He left us the spoilers to the key of Twin Peaks on a still shot in his documentary, which was released before Twin Peaks, I think, maybe. Okay, so this is the word mystery that he's bending with wire. And then you can see some writing up here about a scene that never actually happens. And in this one, he's describing the Monica Bellucci dream. The series is filled with, okay, so the thing at the top, it talks about moving, the action moving into the TV. That's what it says up here, that something moves into the television. The series is filled with Lynch's meta musings about dreams, but he is only one of the dreamers. Audrey is the first dreamer within the dream, but the road to the mystery runs through Odessa, Texas, and Carrie Page's apartment is filled with clues that she is the dreamer. Let me pull that up. All right, here we go. At the very end, Cooper and Diane travel between worlds, leaving the idyllic Twin Peaks and entering a world that looks a lot more like ours. Even their names change. Recently awoken Cooper, now Richard, draws the attention to real-world brands that never appeared in the original Twin Peaks. He looks at the Coke sign, he looks at the Honda sign, they shop at the Valero station. I'm going to call him Cooper. It's Richard, whatever. Anyway, his arrival at her door begins to unravel her reality, and I think it's worth actually trying to play a bit of that, if you haven't seen it recently.
Who is it?
FBI.
Who is it? FBI.
Did you find him?
Did you find him? Okay. Here we have the rest of the clues we need to see that Carrie Page is the woman who is imagining herself as Audrey Horne, as well as the rest of the town, especially the women of Twin Peaks. Now, she is using elements that surround her in her real life to escape into the fictional world of Twin Peaks. So there's this, white horse that symbolizes death in general throughout Twin Peaks. There's the Texas Hold'em and the scratch-off cards, which are going to be impossible to see. They're on the floor. The blue plate special, like the diner, and the casino references. You have like the scratch-off tickets with 777. You can't actually see if they have 777. Just a lot of scratch-off tickets do. But if you look at the mantle, this is the thing. There's these tiny little items which you can't see, and right here is a thimble. And if you remember the scene with that hunchback that I just showed you, she's got a thimble as she's stitching on the Queen of Hearts, and she's creating this sort of like hiding costume that, basically is the thing that she uses to hide from her father, Ben. I'm going to come back to this thing in a minute. It took me a long time, but I think I got it figured out. If you look closely on the mantle, there's a thimble. I already said that. As part of the cycle of abuse, women abused as girls are drawn to abusive relationships later in life. Carrie Page is clearly projecting herself into Shelley Johnson, diner waitress. And here you can see that she is taking care. There's a pot, and she's taking care of this infirm person in her house. And she says, I'm not going to get ahead of my script. And then she's got a line that she always tried to keep a clean house, which mirrors like Shelley scrubbing and scrubbing for Leo. Now here's the thing. This dude who is dead on the chair, this is Leo Johnson, everyone. And there is overwhelming evidence to prove that this is Leo Johnson. First of all, he is wearing exactly the same thing that Leo is. I know I put all of this somewhere, and it is going to be... Hold on. Give me a second. I will find this. It's important to find. This segment right here? Nope. Well, I'm going to skip straight to one of my favorite ones. This kind of builds up in order, but since we're kind of winging it...
One last thing. Leo locked inside a hungry horse.
Leo locked inside a hungry horse, everyone. Leo locked inside a hungry horse. Thank you very much. But there's more. And there's small things like there's chains on the thing. The last time you ever see Leo in the series, he's chained up. But the most important item in the room is the one that you don't see. You see every angle, but there's one corner that is blocked, and there's full of television dinners. And, yeah. So you cannot see. There's TV dinners, TV dinners, TV dinners, and, you know, he's clearly sitting down and looking at what the TV, the place where the TV would be. So, this is the plot of an abused woman using pieces of her real-life world to create the imaginary world of Twin Peaks. It's not a retcon, actually. It's been here from the start, and David Lynch and Mark Frost created a real-world scavenger hunt and invited us to play. Ladies and gentlemen, before Twin Peaks, Carrie Page watched Kyle MacLachlan in the appropriately named 1987 B movie, The Hidden. Oh man, that was anticlimactic because it wasn't actually in the sequence that I was in. That's Audrey stuff. That would be terrible if that went away. Hidden. Where is it? Come on. Well, here. Oh wait, maybe it's in the Lynch. There it is. Yep. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the genesis of Agent Dale Cooper.
FBI.
Bill, she's getting kind of fed up.
Here, his partner has a striking resemblance to Michael Onkeen, and it will pay off in the return. See, there's his partner, and there's Michael Onkeen. But here's the thing: that little creature from the return. All right. You may be suspicious. You may be suspicious, but there's more. Right before Sherilyn Fenn became America's favorite young sex symbol, she appeared in a borderline softcore porn called Two Moon Junction, where she's seduced by an abusive trucker who is clearly the genesis for the fictional projection of Leo Johnson, the doppelganger of the dead man in Carrie's house. Oh, don't believe me? Let me show you. First of all, the man sports this same gash in his head, but here he is with his truck, which is basically the same as Leo's truck. Here he is going at things with sledgehammers. Here is, just to remind you, we'll cut between the two, and there's your going at sledgehammers. And then we have the scene where Leo's going at Bobby with the long blonde hair and everything. Now, here's my favorite. Watch as Leo is shot. And spoiler alert, the end of Two Moon Junction. And shot through a window. Right? I've never actually sat down and watched either of these movies all the way through, but he survives, or it's a dream, and like literally he keeps her from getting married and takes her away from this guy, and he likes to smack on little girls. Creepy dude. Anyway, you should know that Sherilyn Fenn said after The Return that David Lynch wanted her to dye her hair blonde for The Return, probably a reference to Norma Jean Maryland, but also her role here in Two Moon Junction. By the way, Ashley Judd played half of Marilyn Monroe's split personality in Norma Jean and Marilyn, and her home life seems to mirror Carrie Page's. Yeah, what the hell? I know, right? Actually, there are many more of these connections. Some we'll talk about shortly, but it creates a kind of synchronistic connect the dots game that might drive you as crazy as Carrie Page. This might be what caused me to go crazy. Just for example, is it relevant that before Twin Peaks, Machen Amick was in a movie that went by 2 different names, also with Kyle MacLachlan, where the lead was played by Shelley Long? I don't know, but there are things that lead me to believe that that may actually be the case. This pattern of casting actors relevant to outside roles continues well into The Return. There's a reason the casting credit comes right after the title. This well-deserved promise, so let me pull up an episode of The Return. I can't even imagine what these people had to do, but right after Twin Peaks, Twin Peaks The Return, oh, well, this is the first episode, so it's a little different. You get the casting credit. I mean, and people were talking about the casting before, and it's like, wow, what are all these weird people? Yeah, there's a reason for almost all of them. Let's see. So, we'll talk about why Twin Peaks twists through time soon, but it is worth noting that Carrie Page has presumably shot her Leo Johnson, and in the season 1 cliffhanger, Leo Johnson and Cooper are shot at the same time and survive, while Audrey has left a clue to her savior how to find her as her father comes to her bedroom in One-Eyed Jack's. In The Return Part 17, after Audrey has woken up, the arm asks Cooper, is this the story of the little girl who lives down the lane? And The Little Girl Who Lives Down the Lane is a reference to a film starring young Jodie Foster, which is this one, where she's presumed to have killed her father who was abusing her, and later an older man who intends to do the same. Also, Jodie Foster is also an actor who is outspoken about abuse in Hollywood. Now, there is one final item in Leo Johnson's house that eluded me for quite some time. Right here. And what is this thing? Is it a stress ball left over from the 90s? I'm now pretty sure it's a clue to one of the biggest questions from The Return. The identity and whereabouts of the mysterious Billy is one of the biggest seemingly random unanswered questions of The Return. In retrospect, it's our entryway to the interactive mystery of Twin Peaks. The very first time we hear the name, Bing, played by David Lynch's son, comes into the Double R Diner. He just comes in, has anyone seen Billy? And then runs out. The patrons in the diner in this scene, I don't know if you know this already, but the patrons in the diner shift positions, like very obviously. When the camera cuts back, everyone's in a different place, indicating an overlap in realities. As Twin Peaks has clearly introduced many meta-elements and fourth wall breaks, especially Cole's Monica Bellucci dream, I wondered if Billy was actually Billy Zane. Now, before I found that other stuff, this is where my mind was at. I Googled Twin Peaks and Billy Zane, and I came across a guy named The One's blog who had basically already done a great job of laying out the idea, and I will post a link to this eventually. You should read it. But I went a step further. I asked myself, what if the characters that are talking about Billy are actually referencing other movies starring Billy Zane? I looked up his IMDb page only to find out that it seems like Billy Zane has never once turned down a role. Seriously, this man works. But this one particular film stood out to me. I'm pretty good at the Google, and I found a synopsis for a Billy Zane film that mentions a stolen truck, which is something they said about Chuck, and ironically, the thing that started this whole thing in the first place. The log lady stole my truck, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you what may be the biggest inspiration for Twin Peaks: The Return. Here we go. It is Bet Your Life, a 2004 made-for-TV movie. I couldn't find this thing anywhere online, but I found it for $5 on Amazon, and so I took a chance and hit pay dirt. The main character is named Sonny Briggs, whose best friend is Chuck. Sonny Briggs. Sonny starts the movie on the run from Vegas gangsters trying to kill him, and goes on an unbelievably lucky run at a casino. It's like the first thing that happens to him is, oh, the gangsters are trying to kill me. It's just like The Return. Like, they're coming after Dougie, he goes in the casino, wins money. Sonny Briggs, because the gangsters are trying to get him, goes in the casino, gets money. And then Zane's it's run by cliched, campy Vegas types. There's lots of other synchronicities in this. As a matter of fact, let me throw up some clips. Boop. That's this one. No. Yeah. Lucky run. He just goes on an impossibly good run and gets rich. Okay, there we go. We'll stop there. So it's run by a cliched, campy Vegas types. Billy Zane's character flies back and forth on a private jet that looks very similar to Cole's in The Return.
Looks like he's on his way to Cleveland.
One of his sidekicks seems to be at least partial inspiration for the very, very posy Tammy Preston. And the film itself is meta when it's revealed at the end that the main character has been on a reality show the whole time. In fact, it's meta within meta because starring in the movie was the prize for competing in the reality TV show America's Next Action Star. Also, the movie is framed like one of Lynch's favorite films, Sunset Boulevard, with the main character seemingly narrating the film after his death, but this one has a Hollywood ending. There is also something I want to pull. It's a great visual from the end of this movie. I have watched this one all the way through. You're welcome. But at the end, he finds out that he's been watched the whole time, and that, you know, these people are supposed to be watching him, but the footage behind him when he kind of gets up, oh surprise, he's not dead after all, is the shot from the movie, and it looks just like the bit where Cooper is looking through the screen. Look, he walks out in front of it in this terrible green screen, walking out and watching that. Anyway, Audrey spends the entirety of The Return apart from the rest of the story. Even when she enters the roadhouse in episode 16 before Audrey's dance... Let me back up. I'm not following that. Audrey spends the entirety of The Return apart from the rest of the story. Even when she enters the roadhouse in episode 16 before Audrey's dance joins part 16 of The Return back to episode 3, Eddie Vedder sings on stage at the roadhouse. Rocker Eddie Vedder is introduced by his actual real name, Edward Louis Severson, a clue to the overlap of Our World and Twin Peaks. In the alternate reality that is the back half of season 2, the character of the incredibly boring John Justice Wheeler, played by Billy Zane, is imagined as a hokey millionaire playboy who flies in on his private jet to capture Audrey's heart and eventually take her V-card by her choice in a comparatively romantic way, if you don't mind the age gap and the fact that he flies away forever right afterwards. Actually, everyone, this is probably what prompts the obsessive search for Billy in the first place, and the dreamer, who is dreaming herself as Audrey, is clearly a superfan, seeming to follow his entire synchronistic career. I have this clip from I Woke Up on the Day I Died, which is full of, like, it's got pyramids and Carl Stroikenson who plays the giant. It's meta. It should be noted that in the history of Twin Peaks, Billy Zane is the only actor credited with the designation special guest star. Pretty special indeed. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but that's when Cooper shows up in Odessa, the first thing that Carrie Page asks him is, "Did you find him?" She's talking about Billy. Bet Your Life finally solves the riddle of the plane windows. A puzzle which has eluded many superfans, including an NSA cryptographer. So here's the thing. Billy Zane has become completely associated with private planes and this type of character. As a matter of fact, this is a shot from... There we go. So right before being on Twin Peaks, Kyle MacLachlan was in The Hidden, Sherilyn Fenn was in Two Moon Junction. Right before Twin Peaks, Billy Zane was in this terrible movie called Millions.
I'll make you a rich man.
He's a millionaire playboy flying around on a private jet. Here's the thing. Like Cooper and Audrey, flying on a private plane. Okay, so in Twin Peaks, don't have the footage right now, but his plane in Twin Peaks has 2 windows on one side, 1 window on the other. In The Return, Lynch prominently modifies stock footage of a Gulfstream jet to shift the number of windows in a random pattern. In the super low budget Bet Your Life, though I'm sure I can't find a clip right now. Oh, look, there was some plane footage. Anyway, the film uses 3 different planes to represent Billy Zane's private plane as he flies back and forth from Las Vegas to the Midwest. Planes have that N code on them, so I could actually pause the frame, look up the registration of the N code to see what model plane it was, and there were 3 different model planes, each one, don't you know, different numbers of windows. Thank you. These overt and related clues draw our attention to the connection between films in our world and the multidimensional cyclical story of Twin Peaks. It seems Lynch is almost begging us to pull on this thread, searching for clues spanning the history of cinema. In the dreamer's mind, her true love flew off into the sunset and she's been looking for him ever since. I'll be honest, I have no plans to comb through mountains of crappy movies to see if other Billy stories have parallels in his filmography. I leave it to you to explore the rest of the Billyverse, the Zane-verse. But it did finally answer the question that plagued me the longest about the items in Carrie Page's house. That little freaking ball thing. What was that thing? And I think we're looking at season 2, episode 12, if I'm not mistaken. And the music plays. Was it 11 maybe? No, I'm thinking it's 11. Alright, I'm just going to say the first sweater that Billy Zane, John Justice Wheeler wears, the blue pattern on it's the same exact pattern as on that blue ball. Anyway. So, one thing I noticed, I don't know if it's relevant, I found it interesting that John Justice Wheeler has almost the same exact haircut as Bobby in several scenes. So with Bobby as Shelley's emotional escape from the abusive Leo, it's kind of poignant to think about Carrie Page escaping her abusive relationship with her Leo, with her imaginary boyfriend Billy Zane. I don't know if that's a stretch. Oh, here's where I put, when Carrie opens the door, she asks, "Did you find him?" Well, it makes sense narratively to put it later. It should be clear by now that, well, okay, it's a racquetball, but the point is the pattern on it. The pattern on the ball is the pattern on Billy Zane's sweater, like almost exactly, the little balls and the squares, and it's the whole thing. Okay, so it should be clear by now that Twin Peaks takes place in overlapping realities, both internally and externally. But what does this mean? Let's try to put the pieces together, shall we? I'm going to take a sip of my coffee, have some water. How's it going? Any questions? I've been sort of watching things. Of course, Billy Zane is currently working on a Marlon Brando role. So a little aside, as we're taking a break from the script, I told you guys at the beginning of this about the Twin Peaks Odessa thing, but this is far from the first time that this has happened to me with Twin Peaks, and maybe I'll get to the other Twin Peaks synchronicity stories. While I was finishing the last one, it was crazy. Like, that Twin Peaks Odessa thing is something I can relate to. The other things are very difficult for me to relate. But when I was looking all these Billy Zane connections up, right? It's like, so I figured out Billy, this was like a year ago. Figured out Billy Zane in the plane, and there's a lot of connections to, and I didn't put this in the script, but this is a great place for it because we're at kind of a pause place. There's a lot of connections to Stephen King's The Dark Tower series, which is my favorite series of books. Like, there's all of these like signposts that was like, oh, I was born to do this, but there's very specific references. A lot are thematic, and they kind of, I don't want to tell you too much because I'll basically be spoiling the entirety of the series if I say some of these things. But if for by chance you're a fan of The Dark Tower, I will tell you this one bit for those of you who understand what I'm talking about. In the scene where the boy is killed, which should already kind of be resonant for you, the boy who is killed by the car, it seems kind of random. That scene itself is a twin scene in Firewalk with me when Laura's in the car with Leland. But the Carl Rod is sitting watching that scene unfold. And the really interesting thing is that Harry Dean Stanton was in the movie version of Christine, Stephen King's Christine, and his character in the book versus the movie was killed by a car or was not killed by a car. I kid you not. Like, I just hope there's one Dark Tower fan out there who gets what that means. It's mind-blowing that Harry Dean Stanton in it's so like this must be Mark Frost, but in the Secret History of Twin Peaks, it actually mentions that Carl Rod was a bit part actor, and I honestly think that's intentional. There's so much Dark Tower stuff there, it's ridiculous. Anyway, okay, on to the next section. This is the alternate realities of season 2. So this is the section where after I finished the last video, I went back and I really started to dig into these alternate realities, just to kind of prove that I was right, that it really was an alternate reality, and I found more stuff than I possibly could have imagined. All right. Hey, Ray Flores, you know what I'm talking about. Awesome. Oh, I never got to the whole point of that. The whole point of that was that Dark Tower... and roses are a part of the Dark Tower. The rose, the key, and the tower are part of the Dark Tower. And the gunslinger, okay, that gunslinger statue that he's just like looking at, that is unquestionably at least partially a reference to the Dark Tower. The scene of the shootout at Judy's, there's so much stuff. But so I binged, for the heck of it, I binged Billy Zane. I never use Bing. And it came up and put his Instagram right there. And I have a screenshot of this somewhere, but it was Billy Zane with a cowboy hat, Billy Zane coming off a private plane, Billy Zane on the street of New York with the Empire State Building behind him looking just like the poster for the Dark Tower movie, and a frickin' rose. On one frickin' Instagram. That is just Billy Zane, boom, and there it was. I mean, and these things have been happening to me. Like, I don't know, you may believe in synchronicity, you may think I've way too hyperactive creative imagination, but when you've experienced so many of these things so profoundly, it's hard to say there's not something else going on. Anyway, speaking of alternate realities, other than the dream world of the Red Room, the first 18 episodes of Twin Peaks seem to be contained by a singular reality, and for a moment let's forget about the identity of the in-world dreamer who is dreaming it. In the last few years, the idea of multiple realities has become a mainstay of pop culture. In fact, multiple realities is the primary plot device for the now highest-grossing film of all times, Avengers Endgame. Back in the early 90s, these ideas were far less mainstream, and sci-fi concepts were quite a departure for a primetime mystery drama. Reverse engineering Twin Peaks, it's fairly clear that the writers planned to split the show up into multiple realities at the start of Season 2, as they were wrapping up the mystery of Laura Palmer's murder at ABC's insistence. In Episode 2, Donna meets Mrs. Tremond and her magician grandson, at that time played by David Lynch's son, sporting his and Gordon Cole's trademark haircut. Both of Lynch's sons are featured in the series as meta-indicators of alternate realities. Remember Bing, who came in and asked about Billy in that scene where everything changed. David Lynch and his sons are all references to meta-alternate realities in Twin Peaks. In the alternate reality of the back half of Season 2, Annie's existence, or lack thereof, is the entry point to the multiple realities of Twin Peaks. She's incredibly well read for an 18-year-old nun, and then she quotes Heisenberg. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. You've probably at least heard of Schrodinger's cat. Probably come across. Yeah, okay. Yes, unified the old. You just wait, Elxer. You have no idea what I'm about to get into. You've probably at least heard of Schrodinger's cat, a rather dark thought experiment meant to help visualize quantum uncertainty, the core concept of quantum mechanics. The idea is you put a metaphorical cat in a sealed box with a device that has a 50% chance of killing the cat. You close the box, then trigger the device. The idea is that even though you've triggered the device, the cat remains in superposition, both alive and dead at the same time, until you open the box and observe it. Norma's lack of concern for Annie's kidnapping in the finale is far from the first time her very existence is questionable. There's so many of these quotes, like she says, "I always thought Annie was from another time and place," and then Annie says, "I'm disoriented, I don't know where I am," and then she says, "It feels a little strange, the real world, like awakening from a dream." It's like once you look at it and question if Annie is in an alternate reality, almost every scene she's talking about this. In the real world, scientists agree that otherworldly behavior of quantum mechanics is only directly observable in tiny subatomic particles, but recently, studies have shown that it is literally impossible to determine whether or not reality as a whole works this way. Even if the idea, because just very quickly as an aside, the very act of observation changes it, so you can't test it to see if this is the way it works, because every time you test it, it affects it. Even if the idea of multiple universes on a large scale is unprovable, the writers have taken the idea of multiple realities and run with it. One interpretation of quantum mechanics is called the many worlds theory, the idea that many multiple realities exist at the same time. There is one universe where the cat is dead and another universe where the cat is alive. Fun fact, if you're fans of the Joe Rogan podcast, he had a guy named Sean Carroll on this week who spends 90 minutes laying all of this stuff out perfectly. Perfect timing. The man who came up with that theory, Hugh Everett, again, Joe Rogan podcast, talks about this guy, the whole thing, is referenced on the Search for the Zone website created for The Return. Interestingly, Heisenberg and Everett were perhaps the most influential scientists when it came to the concepts behind the nuclear bomb and mutually assured destruction. Okay, so you've got quantum mechanics, the nuclear bomb, and mutually assured destruction. We'll come back to this. The disappearing corn, back in season 2, Donna is at Mrs. Tremond's house. The disappearing corn appears and disappears based upon Donna's observation, right? She looks at the hand, she looks away, she looks at the hand. There's a key connection linking this observation of creamed corn to garmonbozia. God, it's hard to say that. The pain and sorrow we hold within that feeds the evil inside humanity. I think the idea of whether trauma is internalized and hidden or released and observed is key to understanding the whole series. It's this waking up dreamer. Audrey's always, the shattering and putting back together her personalities. Later, Donna returns and Mrs. Tremond is played by a different actress, an unplanned but interesting synchronicity with Donna's recasting in Firewalk with Me, right? Like, so if these are all alternate universes, Maura Kelly Firewalk with Me is a different incarnation. Anyway, so that Donna is very innocent, seems to be starting in, oops, I skipped that. In retrospect, Firewalk with Me is telegraphed to be a darker, different reality from the start in many ways, starting with the very meta opening credits on the big screen, which begins with a TV being smashed, okay? It's a reference, it's all meta. Laura is snorting coke, plenty of scenes that made it awkward to see with your father when you're 16 years old. In this cycle, Donna's Tulpa is from another universe played by a more innocent Maura Kelly, and she seems to be following in Laura's footsteps. This is something that wasn't in the original series. So Laura, or the Dreamer, is desperate to prevent that, keeping this shard of herself innocent. It's especially noteworthy considering Audrey's absence from the film, right? So you didn't have Audrey as the Dreamer's heroine, so it kind of became Donna as this sort of like segregated self. Meanwhile, Sherilyn Fenn went off to get dismembered by Lynch's daughter. It's boxing Helena. Anyway, obviously Firewalk with Me was written after the series, but the multiple realities had already been well established. Mrs. Tremond is responsible for giving Laura the picture of the room with the flowers and the doorway, which is symbolic for the doorway between realities, opening her eyes to the horrible truth. That room is used quite literally by Cole to travel between worlds in The Return. In Firewalk with Me, Mrs. Tremond is called Mrs. Chalfont, the same but different at the same time. Two different Chalfonts exist in the same location in the trailer park, which itself seems to exist in different locations. And at the end of The Return, Alice Tremond answers the door of the Palmer house and says that the woman who lived in the house before her was named Chalfont. She was played by the real-world owner of the house. Like in real life, in Washington, the woman who owned the house played Alice Tremond. It kept us in the fictional town of Twin Peaks, but coming closer than ever to our world through another Tremond-Chalfont connection. The identity of the father to Lucy's unborn child will remain uncertain until his birth, when a blood test will be observed that will reveal the answer. Besides the quantum metaphor, this storyline simultaneously parallels the question of whether the identity of the killer was Ben Horne or Leland Palmer. The identity of Laura's murderer remained uncertain until we, the viewers, observed Leland as the killer. In The Return, Lucy's role as quantum interpreter continues. Is the cat alive or dead? Is the chair red or is it beige? Remember that scene where she's ordering the chair? Her inability to understand how people can seem to be in two different places at the same time is also part of quantum mechanics. Particles can exist in different locations at the same time until they're observed. The idea of there being different Sheriff Trumans who are also Sheriff Trumans, but not Sheriff Truman simultaneously, also reflects this concept. It's clear that Twin Peaks is a cycle, actually a cycle of cycles, like a record player. Record players are a major motif in Twin Peaks, and the idea of waves of reality moving side by side each other plays well with the peak-shaped grooves. Look at a close-up of a record player sometime. Looks like chevrons or peaks. Realities fall apart when needles scratch across records. I'm going to take a break real quick and read this. I wonder if he's going to bring up Andre. I have no idea who Andre Breton is, but I'm going to have to. I'll just later. Fun fact, because the circles on the inside of a record player are smaller than those on the outside, the sound waves are more compact the closer you are to the center. If you take the sound of the record scratches and stretch them out, they give Cooper a clue to the nature of the dreamer and the dream. That I don't know if I can pull these up, but the point is if you stretch that out, the waveform fits exactly with the styrofoam cup that Audrey is. This is not mine. A guy named Ted told me about a post he read on Reddit, but whoever that was got it. The giant is telling Cooper, follow this sound, and it's the sound back to Audrey. Of the pencil piercing the styrofoam cup. That's what that sound is. So my point is, like a record, that sound wave is much closer together. On the outside, much further apart. If you take the sound wave of the and stretch it out, then it sounds like the styrofoam. In Firewalk with Me, we see that some characters are themselves aware that they are caught in a loop. Okay, so Carl Rod in Firewalk with Me says, I don't want to go anywhere, I just want to stay where I am. It's very clear that he knows that universes are not right, which makes him watching that car crash for fans of the Dark Tower even more awesome. Jerry's not just high, but himself becomes aware of the loop. I don't know where I am! Understanding that he is spreading across to different realities. I am not your foot! All of his lines in there. I mean, obviously he's high, but he's in between worlds. This continues throughout The Return to its climax. When the characters become self-aware, they are in a show that is caught in a literal time loop until they can break out of it. Candy just straight up says, I've been thinking this is the version layer. And also, I've been thinking how lucky we are to have air conditioning, which may or may not be a reference to Lucy's favorite book, The Stand. I think there are several synchronistic meanings to Cooper's now infamous final line to the series, but I think one meaning is a reference to a moment right after reality splits in the beginning of Season 2, Episode 11. Listen to what Gordon says here. These guys make a living looking through other people's drawers. Note where the pause is here. Okay, it's really interesting. I wish I could pull it up, but don't want to take too much time. We've all had our socks tossed around. Pause. From time to time. Then Cooper breaks the fourth wall, stares directly into the camera, and he says, "Time to face the music." It's really weird. The very next shot shows a computer with the date, October 22nd, 1990. This is actually much later in the Twin Peaks timeline than it should be. The events of the show take place between February and March of 1989. This date is actually closer to when the episode was probably shot. This is not the only issue with continuity error in the dates of Twin Peaks, but it seems they were synchronistically incorporated into the mythos after the fact at the very least. Or, I don't know, maybe Lynch and Frost can see the future. Then the guy goes, "Agent Cooper, it's showtime." And then I'm going to put up the showtime logo. Bum, 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 bum. Anyway, there's retcons, and then there's retcons. In the dream world of Twin Peaks, all of us are a composite quantum observer. Along with the show's cast and crew, we create the realities of the show together. The story of Twin Peaks, and all stories for that matter, take place in our collective consciousness between two worlds, that of our imaginations combined with our life experiences. Together, right in this moment, you and I are opening a box to see if this particular cat is alive or dead, a process that repeats itself over and over again as we observe the mysteries of life itself. There's this theory that St. Elsewhere is actually this hub of, there's a name for it, I don't have it right now, the hub of interconnected universe that every show ever is connected to. And it's almost like David Lynch and Mark Frost said, yeah, let's do that, but more. Twin Peaks is extremely meta. Metaphors in general are gateways between ideas that allow multiple interpretations to be understood simultaneously. Here, though, is a puzzle box of layers within layers, and there might be an as-yet untold story waiting for all of us between the two worlds of Twin Peaks and ours. I'm going to see if there's any comments between sections. How did you not disintegrate right here? These synchronicities more than thoughts happen. Yeah, okay, so Teddy asks, could these synchronicities have more to do with Lynch and Frost tapping into the collective unconscious? Oh, Teddy? Oh, stay tuned, Teddy. Stay tuned. Kind of Sigil, definitely. Yes, Teddy's on the wavelength. Wondering if he's going to bring up Andrew. Ian, I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, like, that name is vaguely familiar. Just send a link or something. Late respond, Dark Tower here. Big Coffin Hunter's tattoo. Rock on, part Hobbit. Dark Tower fan. Look at all the Dark Tower fans in the house. Thank you. That's fantastic. I mean, like, how about the New York tower next to the tower on the water, right? Anyway. Northside, it looks like two mountain peaks. No, I haven't, but that's awesome. Excellent. Okay. Next section. We're trucking through. We'll get this done in under 2 hours. In all of his works, David Lynch tells us stories based on one of the most influential moments in his life. Okay, so in The Art Life, he basically tells this moment of when he was a child and he saw a naked woman for the first time. They were playing, and this woman kind of walks out into the street in their small suburban town, and she's like, her mouth has been bloodied, and she just kind of sits down there on the curb, and it has this like profound effect on him. And in a way, this moment was when his innocence was shattered, and it seems like, based on his entire body of work, it's the point of origin, including Laura Palmer. In a way, it seems like Twin Peaks might reflect a bit of an existential crisis for Lynch. Then again, one might suspect he thrives on existential crisis. It's almost as if he started to wonder if he's actually the one living in the dream. At the center of all of this is multiple layers of reality that intersect themselves surrounding the death of Laura Palmer, Cooper's journey through time and space to capture Bob and put Bob's victim spirits to rest. He is trying as well to repair something that seems to have gone wrong with the nexus of time and reality itself, of which Laura Palmer's murder seems to be a part. The next level of reality is an imagined dreamer whose mind has been shattered by trauma and is creating there's a diagram here, but don't have it now. The next level, so you've got the middle, the next level is an imagined dreamer whose mind has been shattered by trauma and is creating the imaginary world of Twin Peaks, represented by Carrie Page, who is imagining herself as Audrey Horne, Laura Palmer, and Shelley, and frankly everyone else for that matter. Carrie Page exists on the threshold between Twin Peaks, the unobservable world of the dreamer, and our world, so to speak. In this layer, Cooper is playing the dreamer's subconscious, who is trying to repair the damage, but by reintegrating her reality and waking her up to the real world, what year is this, begins the journey through the nightmare again. Outside of that are the worlds created by Lynch and Frost, as well as other works that directly contribute to the overall metaverse of the story, collective unconscious, what. Finally, we have the meta-narrative or interpretation that exists in our mind, where we combine our life experiences and combine knowledge in the real world with this story, and together create the conversation we're having right now. If you really want to get nitpicky, you could say that I've trapped myself inside this level by creating this video, and you're outside of this reality observing me, but anyway. If there are really infinite worlds, as Everett suggests, does that mean there is a real Dale Cooper and a real Audrey Horne somewhere in infinity where to them we are the imaginary world? I'd ask who or what you think is observing you, but then we'd have to talk about Slaughterhouse-5, and we just don't have time for that. Ask me about that in real life, whatever you think that is at this point. It's easy to get lost in this metaphorical labyrinth, especially in the Twin Peaks universe. It really creates this kind of multidimensional Venn diagram of Venn diagrams that folds in on itself. Gordon Cole is Lynch's meta-projection of himself that acknowledges that Cooper is also a projection of himself. Lynch also establishes himself as the key that opens the doorways, both as the child musician and as director Cole. His Monica Bellucci dream references the actress as a nexus between worlds, including her role in The Matrix, where she leads Neo to the keymaker, who leads Neo to the architect, who reveals to him the multiple universes that contain him. At the same time, she's also a reference to the mythological Persephone, the subject of the spouse of a older aggressive man Hades, who together rule the underworld. At the end of her tale, she spends half her life in the underworld and half her life on Mount Olympus in a cycle, and in mythology represents the cycle of all living things, especially agriculture, from life to death, back to life again. As such, Persephone is one of the guardians of the Eleusinian mysteries, the most secret religious rites of ancient Greece, don't you know? There's a quote that's like, "Get me everything you've got on harvest seasons, Cappy," which I love, because for many reasons. Anyway, Sunset Boulevard, a meta-movie that itself is about disassociation, straddles the line between fiction and reality as well. It coexists in our world and the fictional world of The Return. Cooper, the protagonist, is the vehicle that connects us directly to David Lynch. This is the meaning of Cooper with no visible face in the Monica Bellucci dream. He is seeing the story within a story through Cooper's tulpa, as are we. When Cooper sees the fictional Gordon Cole, mentioned by real-world director Cecil B. DeMille playing himself in the fictional Sunset Boulevard, he knows it's time to cross over between worlds, from his perspective, from Season 3, Episode 15. The universes of Twin Peaks actually exist across several different mediums, a movie, books, audio recordings, digital video, but at the end, in order to escape the bounds of Twin Peaks, he has to go back to the beginning. Electricity is one of the main motifs of Twin Peaks, and television signals back in the early 90s were nothing more than modulated electricity transmitted across the sky, bouncing off our atmosphere, transmitted both out to space and back here to Earth for us to receive. On the outer layer, Cooper is coming towards us so that we may face our own doppelgangers. The Return is not so much a continuation of Twin Peaks. It's not a comeback, it's a return. Sunset Boulevard quote. It's a story that connects the fictional story of Twin Peaks to our world, and it didn't end in 2017. It's still going. This rabbit hole really does seem to go all the way down or up, and many will get lost forever in this cycle. Trust me, I know. Actually, that's part of the story, but there really is a singular master story that weaves through all of these realities, and we're all a part of it. And well, I hope to see you all at the curtain call. I'm gonna go to the chats now. Prince excellent Dark Tower fan. I'm sure you've seen the lore song that yes, oh boy. Brendan is the co-founder of Surrealism. Okay, I can't go further out than I already am. Where's the name? Okay, I'm going to continue on and we'll talk about that later. In the first new scene of The Return, the character we now know as the fireman tells Cooper several things which never seem to pay off in the show in a satisfying way. What exactly is in our house now? And what are the two birds with one stone? Well, As the first new scene in the series, this must be important. After all, the giant is the one that guides Cooper to the murderer of Laura Palmer. Everything the fireman says is as much, if not more so, a clue for us. And their in-world boring payoffs are a sign that there's more beneath the surface. Let's begin with the meeting of Richard and Linda and work backwards. We've talked about how Lynch layers synchronistic intersections to create meaning, but the meaning of the names Richard and Linda are far more meaningfully apparent once you put certain pieces together. Episode 8 is the closest connection to our world, even more so than Part 18, signified by the presence of the 9-inch nails introduced as themselves. It's interesting, none of the characters are interacting, but the show, we see 9-inch nails introduced as themselves to us. So in a weird way, though Episode 8 is the furthest away from Twin Peaks, it's the closest to us. The nuclear explosion is perhaps the most intense moment of the series, alongside the deaths of Maddie and Laura. This episode tears open the doorways between worlds, creating the so-called convenience store, sending out an army of darkness that not only threatens the balance of good and evil, but of reality itself. It also spawns the creation of an angelic Laura Palmer. After 25 intense minutes with no spoken dialogue, the young girl, who we now know as Sarah Palmer, says, "Did you like the song?" Nuclear explosion, 25 minutes and nothing. Did you like the song? This happens on a very specific date. That date, August 5th, 1956, and there is no doubt what this means. That week, the Platters song, My Prayer, was the top song on the Billboard charts, but it would be replaced the following week by Elvis Presley's Hound Dog, a song that changed the world forever, becoming #1 on the pop, country, and R&B charts at the same time. Elvis's version was somewhat sanitized, but the song was originally more overtly about women dealing with an exploitative man, sung by a woman. Elvis's version ironically seemed to take on the man's role. More obvious is that this is the song that scandalized America when Elvis performed it on TV, thrusting his hips provocatively. I mean, it was really, like, I have this. I wasn't going to show this, but, like, it's pretty incredible if you think about what was going on at the time. And then watch this. Like, I have to, lost my remote. That's not a good sign. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so, leave that going. Young, thrusting his hips provocatively. Young women especially responded almost primally, and in a very real way, this could be the first clear moment mass media contributed to a kind of loss of innocence in a dramatic way. Lynch pulls no punches here. The contrast between the innocence of young Sarah's first chaste kiss versus the creatures who came from beyond cannot be denied. I mean, that is graphic. Lynch seems to suggest this broadcast sexuality is a kind of demon that hypnotized and corrupted society through the airwaves in the most graphic way possible. The nuclear explosion of the episode has several relevant meanings which we'll explore, but one is definitively a metaphor for the explosion of media that began to affect our lives and human relationships in many ways. Now we've entered the center of it all. You're almost certainly skeptical. If this is the case, this seems to create an incredible hypocrisy on Lynch's part, right? Hound Dog would change the world forever, but 30 years later, Twin Peaks broadcast graphic sexuality and violence into primetime in a way never before experienced. Imagine Andy going through Flesh World here. And he and Frost are far too brilliant and meticulous not to have noticed this. That's the thing. I believe that Lynch and Frost are unquestionably reflecting on their role in all of this. Like when Lynch or Cole is looking at the door and seeing Laura Palmer. There's several parts of the series when Sarah Palmer is trying to stab the picture of Laura, but it keeps reassembling itself. In fact, I think Cooper, as Lynch's avatar, is essentially portraying the failure of an attempt to put the genie back in the bottle, as crazy as that sounds. This is impossible because the past dictates the future. There really is no going back for any of us, but this particular magician still has a trick or two up his sleeve. He's like the little boy snapping. This would be a good video. Just, I need a team or something. If this is the case, he certainly hasn't said anything publicly about this. Any possible regrets don't seem to have stopped Lynch's use of sexual imagery and graphic violence, but this is far more subtle, deeper, and more complex than you'd imagine. Like, think about Sarah Palmer watching The Boxer and the violence and the lions. You may be feeling incredulous or even protective of Lynch's masterpiece at this point. You probably have your own strongly held beliefs about the media, sexuality, and violence. Please understand, I'm not moralizing or judging. I think the point here is to open a much larger discussion, and this is only one component that of something that's actually kind of incredible. Hang in there. There's a reason I need to show all of this at once. When the fireman says, "It cannot yet be said aloud," he meant it. We weren't ready to hear it. And it's something that we can only unravel together, looking deep within ourselves, each of us as the dreamer. Even if Lynch and Frost were aware of the scope of what I'm about to suggest, I think it's clear they knew they were only seeing a part of it. The giant's name, the fireman, implies that there is a fire to extinguish. And there's the log lady in Firewalk with me grabs hold of Laura and says, "Once this fire starts, it's hard to put out." And it's pretty unquestionable that the fire centers around part 8. We just might be coming to the moment where it's finally time to say it aloud. So this is sort of my point, and it is elixir. Sorry, elixir. That's much easier to say. Yeah, Lynch loves rock and roll, and I see what you're getting at. That's the point. It's the reflection upon the nature of it, knowing that it is something that is a part of our lives and that we like and value. That's, give me a second. This huge moment of transition in episode 8 is wired to Cooper and Diane's transformation to Richard and Linda, 10 episodes later throughout the prominent reprise of My Prayer. After the spirit of Bob is defeated by the cast at the sheriff's office, Diane is reborn, paired with the newly reborn Cooper by way of Dougie, guided between layers of reality by Gordon. Cooper and Diane apparently travel through space and time, driving a classic car exactly 430 miles to a threshold between worlds. Cooper says, "Kiss me. Once we cross, it could all be different." Think about the young Sarah Palmer's kiss and then crossing a threshold, right? They're in a classic car, then they cross over, and then the next day they're in modern times. To understand what's going on here, we need to return to Season 2, Episode 22, and I am going to pull this so that we can see this, so I can show you what I'm talking about. There it is. I think. Yeah, okay, it's this scene. Yeah, that's it. Okay. Yeah, this is really important. Okay. To understand what's going on here, we need to return to Season 2, Episode 22, to examine the origin of Cooper's doppelganger, Mr. C. Different realities in Twin Peaks are not instantaneous. They fade around the edges and overlap around various portals, coexisting in the thin places between worlds. Mr. C does not make his first appearance when Cooper exits the Black Lodge. Mr. C begins to emerge as Dale first enters Glastonbury Grove. Look at his demeanor here. Look at him. There's Mr. C. Coop? He's zoned out, staring. Look at that turn.
Harry,
Listen to his voice.
I have to go on alone.
That's Mr. C. So he takes on Mr. C as he crosses the threshold into, look at him, that's Mr. C right there. Different realities in Twin Peaks are not instantaneous. Mr. C, you're not mistaken, James and Demeter. Yep. What is the darkness that invades Cooper's soul as he crosses over? Okay, here's where I'm really going out on a limb. What is the darkness that invades Cooper's soul as he crosses over? It's the darkness summoned by the effects of his infidelity with Caroline, Wyndham Earle's wife. Because we see the fantasy world of Twin Peaks as overlapping realities, once Wyndham Earle is introduced as a character, previously squeaky clean Dale Cooper starts to overlap with the tainted version of Dale that is now carrying the garmonbonzia of Caroline's death, ultimately costing him his relationship with Annie. In the moment where we witness the stabbing of Dale in reverse, that he returns to the moment of his transgression and agrees to accept that pain and suffering, thereby sparing but losing Annie. I do. This is the gateway that allows this darkness to take root and be released into the world by way of Mr. C. Although adultery has been a theme from the start, it becomes the focus at the start of the return. Mr. C actually seems to be fueled by infidelity and the corruption of relationships. I mean, just think about it. It's I don't know, Martha and pretty much all. Even Tim Roth is married to Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, and like here have like all the women. He's getting it on with all of these women who are in other relationships. Once the good Dale has finished his time in purgatory of the Black Room, Mike, who cut off his arm to separate himself from his sins, returns Dale to reality where the garmonbonzia of Dougie's infidelity serves as a manufactured fuel source for Mr. C, helping him maintain a hold in this world. Cooper enters this world as newly reborn Dougie, and in doing so, restores the purity of his tulpa in this world. It's clearly shown here in this non sequitur with him refusing the advances of a coworker. Like, as soon as, when Dougie goes to work, this woman is trying to, like, get with him. It's the only time you ever see her, and she's like, hey, Dougie, let's get it on. I don't know why she's into that version of Dougie. Maybe he's handsome, I guess. And he doesn't, right? Like, that's kind of a big point. There are clear references to King Arthur's going back to season 2. The entrance to the Black Lodge is called Glastonbury Grove, the place where Arthur is buried. References to the Grail story are present throughout Dougie's neighborhood. The love story at the center of it is the love story at the end of the Arthur story, is a tale of a love triangle between Arthur, his Queen Guinevere, and Lancelot. It's actually this infidelity which leads to the death of Arthur, okay? There are 3 sex scenes in Twin Peaks. I'm not counting Jade, that's not actually sex. The first happens during the breaking of a promise and a failure to stand guard against the thing, the room with the weird box in it, right? The second is the purified marital reconciliation of Janie E. and the newly reborn Dougie. And the last is an obvious shadow, the uncomfortably dark scene that transforms Cooper and Diane into Richard and Linda. Audrey's melodramatic scenes with Charlie are about blatant infidelity, but more importantly, they're a direct reference to the movie Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, based on the classic film. Thanks, Ted. There's parallels to Audrey and Charlie's frank discussion of an interloper, but the most important thing to note here is not the plot, but the actors who starred in it, okay? So think about how the actors who play these roles are all very relevant to the characters they're creating and what they represent. Elizabeth Taylor, who Sherilyn Fenn played in a biopic, okay? So Sherilyn Fenn played Elizabeth Taylor in a biopic, and Taylor's real-life husband, Richard Burton, okay? Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton. Before there was Brangelina, there was Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. The celebrity couple, by the way, the scenes with Charlie are unquestionably Who's Afraid with Virginia Woolf. Like the house that they're in, the tone of it's that play. Before there was Brangelina, there was Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, the celebrity couple whose high-profile affair is almost single-handedly changed the attitudes about divorce in America. It began on the set of Cleopatra, ironically another story about adultery. They both left their respective spouses for each other. The affair started in scandal, but came to be romanticized. If anything, it seemed to improve their popularity. The couple would go on to star in 11 films together. In the film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Taylor's character has her own kind of disassociation, living in an imaginary world where she has a non-existent child named Sonny Jim. I don't even know how to explain this particular synchronicity. Oh, shoot. There's a YouTube video. Oh, I'm just going to show you. Why not? Because it's just crazy. Sure. Oh, can I? Never mind. Anyway, just Google Richard Burton Twin Peaks on YouTube. See what comes up. In parallel to Burton, Linda is a reference to Linda Lovelace, star of the iconic porn movie Deep Throat. the first film to bring pornography into the mainstream. Amanda Siegfried. Where is this? I think it's at the end here. Is that her? Yeah, there we go. Amanda Siegfried plays Becky, who is caught in a drug-fueled abusive relationship with Steven. Siegfried stars in the biopic Lovelace, playing Linda, who is pressured into porn in an abusive, drug-fueled relationship. The shot after the sequence of Becky's introduction directly mirrors a shot in the movie Lovelace. And I'm going ahead and presuming this mirrors a shot in Deep Throat. Not that I wouldn't, I just haven't done that. Lovelace's porn scenes were shot in seedy motels with no budget, yet Deep Throat earned millions and became a public sensation. Linda Lovelace even appeared on The Tonight Show. The theme of corruption of innocence has always been pervasive throughout Twin Peaks, and at some point, Lynch seems to have realized the irony here. As Cooper and Diane cross over the threshold and begin the process of becoming Richard and Linda, the journey to 430 is not actually a measurement of miles. The fireman doesn't say 430, 430, it's actually a reference to a date. That would be the night of April 30th, or 430, is originally a pagan holiday known as Walpurgisnacht, also known as Witches' Night. It's a time when the veil between worlds is thinnest, a prime time used for rituals. Walpurgisnacht, by the way, is the name of Act 2 of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. This holiday is directly linked to May 1st. They're connected. Also called Beltane, or May Day, which is about the arrival of spring and sexuality. These are a portal between seasons, having connected but alternate meanings. And May Day is the last thing written by Major Briggs in the Secret History before he disappears between worlds. Like if you go to the very last page of the Secret History, the very last thing Major Briggs writes is May Day. Beltane is known as a fire festival, and a special kind of fire is kindled. On Beltane, couples pledge themselves to each other and, holding hands, jump over the fire. Twin Peaks contains numerous ciphers that are intended for certain kinds of viewers to find, and we're about to find out if you're one of them. The Return gives 2 keys that unlock this invitation. In the scene with the woman in red, Gordon says, oh, I've got to pull this up because you have to see this yourself. It's pretty great. So, I just have to remember which one I put it in. Thank you, Exler. You're my new best friend. I think it was in the David Lynch one. Yeah? The beginning of this? No? Oh, for crying out loud. Oh yeah, there it is. All right, so in this scene, okay, so this, again, this is just to recap as we kind of started here, it's been a while. So, you know, there's this woman who is a secret clue for Chet. And then we have this woman who is a secret clue to us. This is not for Albert, this is for us.
Trey Chic.
There's Audrey's black and white and red shoes, okay? Then she picks up a mirror, okay? Just like Audrey looking in the mirror at the end of episode 16, right? Little round mirror. Oh, there's Audrey. Her hair, it's in a bob like Audrey's. Takes its time. I'm gonna fast forward. She's wearing a red dress. This is important too. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to that. I mean, Albert is watching the code, but it never comes up again. Here we go.
Being a friend of her.
Okay.
He's a crazy.
Listen to what Cole says.
She's here visiting a friend of her mother, whose daughter has gone missing. The mother owns a turnip farm. I told her to tell the mother that her daughter will turn up eventually.
Okay, so turnip turn up. Turnip, turn up. This is the famous refrain we've heard over and over since the beginning of the series. It's scripted two different ways. Don't know if you know this. In the pilot, through the dark of future past, the magician longs to see. One chance out between two worlds, firewalk with me. Now, no matter how hard I try, if I say chance, as in no, that hopefully that wasn't racially insensitive, chance, I'm going to say chance. Now I'm going to say, like, take a chance. Chance. You cannot tell the difference in the way that it sounds. In the original pilot episode, the first time you hear it, it's C-H-A-N-T-S, and after that it becomes C-H-A-N-C-E. I think it actually has two meanings that are layered on top of each other. But that's not what I'm talking about here. It's firewalk with me. It's not just firewalk with me, it's firewalk with me. It's an invitation to firewalk, take the path between the two worlds to exit. There's a scene, the last scene with John Justice Wheeler, Billy, and I can't find it, it's not worth it. He sits down with Cooper by a fireplace and talks about firewalking. That's his sort of like last scene with Cooper. Billy and Wheeler live between two worlds. That's what they're talking about then. As does Nido. I don't know if anyway, I just kind of skipped ahead. As is Nido, played by the actress N-A-E. If you take the name N-A-E and Nido, those words become Diane-O. The symbol on the jade ring is a guide to the gateway between worlds, and Lynch, as the young magician, serves as a guide. The story of Twin Peaks is a journey to escape the fractured disassociation of the dreamer, caught between a dream and reality. But there's more than one dreamer existing in more than one world, and Laura is the one, a paradoxical angel that will guide the other dreamers through the fire by way of her imaginary sacrifice. The question is, are you ready to take the chance and follow me on the journey between worlds? Firewalk with me. No, it's a thing, I was an edit thing. It's strange to think of Twin Peaks as some kind of PSA about the cycle of abuse and violence, the exploitation and abuse of women, mental health, and the immorality of infidelity and corruption of society by the media. I don't mean that Twin Peaks is moralizing so much as it seeks to show a particular pattern to reflect on it. David Lynch has at least a subconscious nostalgia for simpler times. He says we had everything we needed in a 5-block radius. I think actually the convenience store, the idea of a convenience store, is the thing that ripped those worlds apart. But acknowledges that there was always darkness underneath. The abuse of the woman-bloodied mouth, that was still present in his little idyllic childhood. But partnered with Mark Frost, they've created a mystery to explore that extends to the farthest reaches of our imagination. I think they have realized on some level what they have produced is a work that's a part of something much greater. We've arrived at our own place between worlds at the entrance of Owl Cave. I'm about to lay out a theory so strange and so incredible, I guarantee you've never seen anything like this before. This is the last video I'm going to make about Twin Peaks again, and it's anything but definitive. I want this to be the start of a conversation. What is the purpose of Cooper's journey, and why is Laura the one? To find these answers, we're going to have to travel a long way out of Twin Peaks. In fact, we're going to have to travel outside of this world so that we can return to the start. From this point forward, you won't see Twin Peaks the same way ever again. In fact, hopefully, maybe, some of you might not see anything the same way ever again. So my question for you now is, are you ready to firewalk with me? Okay, take some water. Anything? What do we got? Thanks, Elixir. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to see the development of The Return for sure, especially considering what I'm about to talk about. Twin Peaks is packed with seemingly random quirks that are actually Easter eggs meant as a kind of wink to a very small subset of the audience already in the know. The owls are not what they seem. The secret history blurs the line of reality and fiction by incorporating real historical figures and events into a composite fictional world. It's full of references to conspiracies, real and imagined, ranging from Watergate to Roswell. This is not a surprise, as the show was the precursor to The X-Files, having combined these esoteric themes with a quirky, charismatic FBI protagonist. I mean, Agent Bryson was kind of both Mulder and Scully, if you think about it. To me, the idea that Laura is the one has become more and more profound. Not only is she sent to contain evil incarnate released into a fictional world, I believe this quirky but tragic story has created an incredible opportunity to shine light into a pervasive darkness that is threatening to engulf us all. Here's the point where this video splits into separate realities depending on your worldview. I'm trying to bridge the gap between those who believe in the spiritual or paranormal and those who don't, without asking either side to change that view. Metaphors and stories are a way for us to explore complex ideas together, even though we see reality differently. Would you prefer the blue pill or the red pill, Alice? Is this video a creative product of my over-caffeinated imagination, or could it potentially be a plausible explanation of life, the universe, and everything told through a parable of a cult TV show? Maybe we should try to see both realities at once. Imagine Dr. Jacoby with his red and blue glasses. Actually, I think that's kind of the trick. Twin Peaks' synthesis of esoteric topics ranging from Eastern religion to quantum mechanics dovetails perfectly with a theory I've been working on since 2012. Actually, it was researching these topics that seems to have given me a particular insight into the deeper mysteries of Twin Peaks. I'll be honest, at times I've gone a little Nadine while digging into these ideas. My vape runners! But I do think I'm onto something here, and for the select few that can follow it to the end, I promise an incredible interpretation of the show you'll never forget. Of course, there's more than one meaning of the word incredible. When you rewatch Twin Peaks with the idea that Audrey represents a disassociated dreamer in an imaginary world, it changes the context of the show completely. The past dictates the future, but what if the future influences the present? What if the deepest mysteries of Twin Peaks could only be revealed once we had enough real-world clues to unlock them? We're going to fly through a lot of subjects quickly, as if we haven't, and I'll put keywords on the bottom of the screen. No, I won't. For those who wish to investigate these ideas further, I'm such a liar. Are you ready to open this door between? We're getting to the end here. Are we? No, we've brought it another half hour. Who am I kidding? At least. We're about to connect the meanings of the most fundamental elements of Twin Peaks to the most fundamental elements of reality. And for my next trick. Have you ever heard of a place called the White Lodge? We're going to connect the lodges, the owls, and the fundamental symbols of Twin Peaks. I'll explain more than one reason the experiment is called the experiment, and I'll suggest new insights about Philip Jeffries, the log lady, and what's really hiding in those trees. But there's a bit of a science lesson first. Nadine has this great quote about relativity, which we'll go there, maybe. This isn't relativity. Actually, Nadine, it kind of is. One of the main themes in Twin Peaks has always been duality, and the fundamental principle of quantum mechanics is called particle-wave duality. The key to most, if not all, worldviews is a paradox, the unification of opposites. Fate or free will, yin or yang, even the Holy Trinity is actually two things unified by a third. In science, a paradox of uncertainty surrounds the basic understanding of our existence. Even duality is nested within another duality. The quantum realm and the physical realm don't seem to operate by the same set of rules, but we need both to exist. Perhaps the answer lies in the mystery of that unknowable divide. Don't worry, I'm not going into any math here. We're going to be looking at the metaphors beneath the science. After all, the universe is ultimately composed of invisible, nameless connections we try to understand and explain through the lenses of words, pictures, numbers, and intuition. What if there's a single pattern that ties all of this together? And then there's that quote of Ben holding the book saying, "Gentlemen, I hold in my hands the greatest works, and from them I will derive meaning." Earlier, we talked about the famed Schrodinger's cat, but I think I've come up with an easier way to explain quantum uncertainty where we don't have to murder an imaginary pet. Say a friend was coming to pick you up, and she could take one of two different routes to get to your house. As long as she arrives at exactly the same moment, from your perspective, she's actually taken both routes to get to you, until you ask if she took path A or path B, at which time her route would become your shared reality. Is this future or is this past is a great question. In a quantum sense, the present moment is defined by the established past, which includes all of the possibilities that got you to the same point, plus all of the future possibilities from this point. It's Not just an abstract idea, we have proof of this strange behavior of time. There's this real-world experiment called the dual slit experiment. This is much better with visuals. I'll go fast. Scientists fire atoms one at a time that have the possibility of going through one of two openings in front of a photographic plate. After firing many atoms one at a time, their impact generates a pattern that indicates that the single atoms, invisible to the naked eye, seem to travel through both holes at the same time, riding waves of multiple possibilities at once. During the trip, all of the atom's path is affected by all of its other possible paths through both openings along the route before it arrives as a singular atom at its destination. But if you use a special camera, if you put a camera to observe or test which hole the atom is going through, the pattern of impact changes, eliminating the possibility that the ghost atoms affect each other. When you turn that camera off, this is a real-world experiment, you turn that camera off and the pattern changes back, and the atom behaves as if it goes through both slits at once again. Simply watching the openings to see which hole the atom passes through collapses all of the possible realities into one single choice, just like asking which route your friend took to pick you up creates a shared reality. This jaw-dropping revelation that the act of passively observing changes the behavior of atoms is astonishing. Scientists are still unable to agree on the full implications of these revelations. Here's where it comes to Twin Peaks. Okay, in the return, and I'm going to pull this up as a visual because you need to see some more Twin Peaks at this point. In the return, you got that glass box, don't you know? Yeah, okay. So here we go. Good. In the return. The glass box is an obvious reference to the dual slit experiment. There are cameras, as well as a human observing the box. That is some kind of doorway between multiple realities. The interesting thing about Twin Peaks here is that it is asking the question of whether a human must be watching as well as a camera, and what it means if the cameras are watching but not the human. There's something to note that most explanations of this experiment seem to leave out. If we can't observe the multi-world path of the invisible particle directly, we do observe its single-world reflection, the pattern of the wave on the photographic plate. In this case, we observe the metallic grains in the photograph. You need visuals. In other words, even though you can't see the multiple realities, you see the reflection in the wave pattern that's created by the pattern of the particles. Our view of reality, and it's the actual, the photographic plate metallic particles that are doing the observing, not the camera in this case. Our reality moves in particle-wave cycle, and observers, so to speak, both conscious and not, have different ranges of observation. If Sam hadn't been diverted by Tracy, he would have observed Cooper, collapsing the wave function and probably trapping Cooper in a box. This is what I think that Mr. C was doing here. He was hiring this guy to watch the thing, so if Cooper showed up, he would pop into existence there and be stuck in the box. However, when the experiment was drawn into the box, Sam and Casey at that point do observe it, making it corporeal and drawing it into their world. All of that stuff with those were all of the multiple realities Cooper was going through. Sarah Palmer's channeling of the experiment is the metaphorical reflection of the monster she observed by not observing Leland's abuse of Laura. This is a big deal. I'm going to say it again. Sarah Palmer's channeling of the experiment, later, right, she took her face off, it's the metaphorical reflection of the monster she accepted by not observing Leland's abuse of Laura until it was too late, and then she finally did, and monster. Finally forced to confront the terrible truth, she took on the reflection of this evil, the dark reflection of the evil spirit materialized within her, cast by the reflection of Bob, the relationship between the two. In part 2, immediately after Cooper is not observed in the glass box, we cut to Sarah Palmer. It just goes boom, right there, now possessed, observing violence very intently. Okay? Meanwhile, Dale continues to move unobserved through multiple realities as a wave before moving through literal water into the tower surrounded by literal waves. The camera's going as he's going through the wave function. He arrives as a wave passing through multiple realities simultaneously. It's interesting to note here that Nido cannot see, right? She's blind, so she cannot observe Cooper, so to speak. With Nido and Briggs' guidance, Dale sets on a path to enter episode 3. That's the junction of worlds. All of those realities are going, and then he goes off, and that's connected to episode 15, and he observes Gordon Cole and blah, blah, blah. Also interesting to note here, he comes upon Ronette Pulaski as a guidepost to this journey, but when he first sees her from the back, her hair looks like Audrey's bob. Just like the back of her head, just like the back of Cooper's head, just like Cooper and Cole are kind of the same person. This concept of particle-wave duality is at the heart of quantum mechanics. Matter and energy can behave like a particle or wave depending on observation. The wave function is an expression of probability, a theme repeated throughout the return. There's Ike rolling the dice, right, and the coin that flips and stops in midair. But why does the coin stop in midair? With particles, we know the definitive position, but they're static. With waves, we know the speed and all the possible positions. The exact position and the speed of an electron cannot be determined simultaneously by a single observer, yet both are required for reality to function. So reality must have some way of observing both the particle and the wave, even if the wave is a reflection. That's enough of the physics lecture for now. I want to talk about the metaphor underlying particle-wave duality. Oversimplified into a universal metaphor, a wave is an ethereal range of possibilities, and the particle is definitive and static. During Andy's journey into the White Lodge, the fireman reveals the whole thing to the most steadfast and simple character in the show, far more particle than wave. He is shown key scenes that represent the particle-wave duality. Like, this is just all of the things that Andy looks at are all quantum physics metaphors. Almost. Taught in the lesson of multiple realities, and even the world outside Twin Peaks. I think that the thing he's holding, that weird shape thing, might be a kind of model of the shape of reality, showing different perspectives of universes coming together to form the composite unified reality. Andy and Lucy, the steadfast particle and the ethereal wave, are responsible for collapsing all of the realities into a single self-aware moment working together. The chair, right? This, by the way, gives interesting new subtext to their dialogue at the beginning of the season 2. This must be a retcon or the collective unconscious or whatever, but go watch the season 2 finale. Andy and Lucy talking about the blackout after the Miss Twin Peaks contest, but think about it as them having disappeared from, getting caught in the loop, having disappeared in a quantum sense. It's amazing. There's plenty more for you to observe about quantum uncertainty rewatching these two. Not going to go into all of it, obviously. So as far as we know, reality is formed by waves and particles, metaphorically abstract and concrete. Wave hypothetical, particle tangible. Are you following me? I hope so. I believe that building upon this metaphor is the key to explaining many things about the meta-reality of Twin Peaks and also our existence. So much so that I can only touch on a tiny bit of them here. Aren't you lucky? Let's start with the basics. In The Secret History, Frost, via Dr. Jacoby, makes a reference to the corpus callosum. Okay, there's this part, it's a lot like Cooper, no? Yeah, I'll come back to you. The corpus callosum. This is the bridge between the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. Though it's not simplified in general, we think of the right and the left hemispheres of the brain being divided between creative versus logical, feeling versus thinking. In people who have this bridge severed, and you must, if you have not done so before, Google split brain experiments and get lost in the most incredible YouTube hole you'll ever get lost in. Each half of the brain acts as an almost separate individual and supports the idea of a parliamentary brain, effectively that your brain has many conflicting and complementary thoughts at once and sums them up by voting, in a sense, to create a unified self. Now get ready for some Dan Brown. One fundamental duality of humanity is the balance of what is referred to as the sacred masculine versus the sacred feminine. Some of the most ancient symbols for masculine and feminine are the opposing pyramid shapes, or the blade and the chalice. Basic attributes are correlated with gender, but these are by no means absolute in sexes, and everyone is a combination of so-called feminine and masculine traits. Men can be driven by feminine energy, women can be driven by masculine energy, and I figure anybody is capable of avoiding oversimplification. It's fans of Twin Peaks, right? A tendency on our parts to assign these traits to value makes it difficult to discuss this. The idea that masculine or feminine preferences can be objectively measured is ridiculous. We need both in varying amounts and priority depending on every situation. This can be a touchy subject, so in any case, for the rest of this video, try to understand I'm trying to show a pattern, and I strongly oppose discrimination. Finding correlations without discrimination is neutral. Turning correlations into absolute stereotypes, that's bad, okay? In the metaphorical sense, the masculine prioritizes thinking over feeling, and the feminine feeling over thinking. Thinking involves the organization of data points into concrete structures, whereas feeling is more generalized and diffuse. Masculine traits are associated with competition, analysis, and hierarchy. Feminine traits are associated with the collective, creativity, and connection. Masculine the one, feminine the all. Now, let's combine these concepts: quantum physics, multiple realities, and the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. For the record, I'm about to go way off the reservation if I haven't already, but don't worry, we'll come around full circle. Though it's a little hard to get your head around, Einstein's theory of relativity explains that space and time are actually the same thing. In a vast oversimplification, from your perspective, it takes time to get from point A to point B. So that distance in space is also a distance in time. Something between something about energy and the speed of light, and presto, there's no difference between space and time. But in quantum mechanics, there's this concept called non-locality and entanglement, or colloquially, spooky action at a distance. From our perception, it takes time to get for energy or matter to get from point A to point B, and therefore affect each other. But the thing is, in the quantum realm, some quantum particles are linked instantaneously. Whether they are affecting each other instantly through a wormhole, or whether there is some yet unknown variable affecting them simultaneously, the implication is the same. Fundamental elements of reality are linked instantaneously through time, which must mean they can be linked through all of time, from the Big Bang through the heat death of the universe. Do you know what this means? This means that we are experiencing a reality whose nature is somehow perceived as both measurable and infinite within its boundaries at the same time. Now, I'm far from the first person to suggest a connection between quantum mechanics and the duality of the body and the infinite mind or spirit, but we're about to connect this in a really interesting way. In the secret history, there are secrets within secrets. By the way, Jupiter and Saturn are meeting for the first time in 20 years in, 4-2 Protoman said there's a time when Jupiter and Saturn meet and they will receive you. They only meet every 20 years. Twin Peaks was nowhere near that actual conjunction. That would be in December of 2020. And don't you know, they're conjuncting in Aquarius for the first time in over 600 years. It's the age of Aquarius, the age... Anyway, the secret history, there are secrets within secrets, but maybe none of them as important as this image. The owl and the pyramid here are rendered in green and red ink. Okay, so this is in the secret history. I should have had it with me. It's designed to be viewed by glasses like Jacobi's. Right under the corpus callosum diagram, there's a view of his theory about the hemispheres of the brain in these 3D glasses. So there's a pyramid that's in red and an owl that's in green. And if you have the glasses on, you see the pyramid in one eye and the owl in the other, and it creates this weird three-dimensional shape. Green is closer in space-time, and the particle more in focus. Red further away, the wave more diffuse. The owl is red. Which brings us to the owls and the lodges. From the first episode of Season 2, we hear this refrain: the owls are not what they seem. There's more than one secret that's lain hidden in Twin Peaks for more than 25 years, and Mark Frost really wants to make sure you see this one. Little did I know, my favorite line of the series really shows how much meaning is locked away in those random lines of dialogue. And that was the scene where Cooper says...
There's nothing quite like urinating out in the open air. I look forward to hearing more about this White Lodge.
In what could only be a wink to those who knew at the time, all throughout Season 2, but especially right here, Frost is referencing the Bohemian Grove, a real-life secret society that meets amongst the redwoods in Northern California and plays host to the most influential businessmen and politicians in the world. The rest of the scene, which creates the basis for the return, is jam-packed full of direct references. Owls, hooded figures, all of that stuff. There's actually more scattered throughout. There's a, who is it? Doug says, Milford says, there's some kind of bohemian or something. But considering the material in the Secret History, the original references are unquestionable. The Secret History just directly talks about the Bohemian Grove. What it all means, however, is a question. Twin Peaks has always been about the dirty secrets that underlie society. On one level, Twin Peaks is, and it has always been, about the real-life struggle between secret societies that has probably been going on since before recorded history. There's actually several different references to opposing factions. Wyndham Earle talking about Doug Buzz. Just in general, the idea of lodges, the Bookhouse Boys, the Bohemian Grove references, obviously. But in general, what we're talking about here is what you might call the Illuminati. Freemasons, all that stuff. And Secret History is full of this stuff. The Bohemian Grove has creepy ceremonies outdoors under a giant wooden owl, and you can find this in mysterious corners of YouTube. And owls are heavily associated with the secretive group. In almost every article you find about them, heavy drinking and the resultant outdoor urination is a weirdly treasured tradition. Like literally, like most of the articles talking about the Bohemian Grove talk about how the guys love to pee outside. You can read the owls are not what they seem in several different ways. One is that even though they're a downright creepy seeming cabal of occultists composed of some of the most powerful men in history, they're actually a much more innocent explanation for their hijinks. That's actually what they call it, hijinks. It also could mean that they say, that everything they say is a pretend ceremony. There's actually something much darker than that which is going on, which is frankly beyond terrifying to think about. In any case, it means they appear to be one thing, but are actually something else. I honestly don't know which one is implied, but looking into the Bohemian Grove, a couple of things stand out to me. In fact, at the end of the Secret History, there's an exchange between Major Briggs and Doug Milford about Bohemians, and that paints Bohemians in a very positive light. But there's a huge difference between Bohemians and the Bohemian Grove. If you're into creepy things, and if you're into Twin Peaks, you're into creepy things, I recommend searching for the Cremation of Care script. You'll find it interesting, if not illuminating. Tinfoil hat enthusiast Alex Jones made his career based on infiltrating the Grove and shooting a grainy video of their annual opening ceremony where a human effigy as Care is sacrificed under a giant owl in the woods. This fake human sacrifice is confusing. Without context, it seems to be the most powerful men in the world literally pretending to kill a person to eliminate empathy or caring, which should be creepy no matter what your political or religious persuasion. That said, dull care, the thing that this is supposed to be named after, is kind of an antiquated term and doesn't seem to mean what it normally does. Kind of the opposite, actually. If you read the words and have a moderate degree of understanding of metaphor, you'll see that it's about banishing the talk of everyday business deals. Those are the dull cares of the world. The point seems to be to let go, be happy, and enjoy each other's company as people, not as businessmen. Apparently, even exchanging business cards is forbidden for attendees. Looking at the original makeup of the Bohemian Grove, it was clear the point was about the intermingling of the Bohemians, a lot of journalists, writers, artists of all kinds with diverse backgrounds, but mostly writers, with the most powerful men in the world. Grove visitors stay in relatively modest cabins, not their usual luxury accommodations. It certainly seems, though, that the original instinct was to communicate with nature and regain perspective. Whether you believe in spirituality, mysticism, and magic, or you don't, there's no denying secret societies in general are gathering places of some of the most intelligent and powerful people in the world. The members of the Grove are mostly powerful conservatives, but others, like longtime Google CEO and Democratic supporter Eric Schmidt, has been to the Grove. Whatever else it is, it's the meeting of the minds of the men who run the world. And it has always been a place for them to get in touch with their feminine side. Besides the focus on artists, theater, and urination, there's also a tradition of cross-dressing at the Bohemian Grove. There's this quote from Nixon where he says, "It's the most faggy damn thing I've ever seen." That's a terrible Nixon. Nixon was terrible, whatever. Anyway, there's pictures of them all in drag, these conservative bastions of business in drag, and anyway, the owls are not what they seem, I guess. The whole thing, though, is about the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine. Whether they know it or not, it's about quantum mechanics and multiple realities. So, here we are, at the top of the pyramid. It seems we've strayed incredibly far from where we've started. We've talked about sexual and physical abuse of women by powerful men, the reflection of turning a blind eye to this caused by non-observation. We've talked about alternate realities, both real and imagined, metafictional works that are aware of themselves and interact with our world. We've talked about disassociation, dreams, and metaphors, and far, far, far too much about quantum physics. We've talked about how art and media shape our reality, and the related changes in our culture when it comes to sexuality and relationships. And now it seems like we're talking about the freaking Illuminati. What's next? Am I going to tell you Twin Peaks hold the secret to the Holy Grail? Actually, for reasons I'm about to explain, I believe we have been pulled through time to this moment, you and I. I think the entire tapestry of the zeitgeist is assembling to try to tell a single story. For me, Laura is most definitely the one, the entry point that allows me to talk about all these things in search of others, or maybe just the one, apparently it's Elixir, who can truly hear me and help get this message out. Some of us create the dreams and others interpret them. Some paint the pictures and some do the math. Because of the nature of quantum mechanics, it seems that we see shadows of multiple realities interacting across time. I believe that fiction and art is the way we express our visions of the future so we can guide ourselves. And I think some of us see more of the tapestry than others. It's impossible for me to finish this video without relating some personal stories because this is where the path has led me. And they are more than relevant to all of the topics here, and they all go back to Twin Peaks. I've experienced more than one type of trauma in my life, but one especially intense one back when I was 12. 4 months before the premiere of Twin Peaks in 1989, there was a shooting at my middle school in Virginia Beach. A classmate of mine brought a 9mm gun and 225 rounds of ammunition loaded into 50-round clips to a tiny private secondary school. He killed one teacher and shot another before coming into the classroom next to mine in the portable trailer. We were absolute sitting ducks. All the trailers had giant glass windows in the doors. The death toll would have been much higher, except his gun jammed. He was tackled, and the rest of us were spared. I know that he was an intent to kill all the 100 or so students in my school because I visited him in prison in 2015. If you want to read more, I'll put a link down below eventually of the story that I wrote about it in the comments. But my point is, every time there's a mass shooting, I have a PTSD type reaction, ranging in severity depending on specifics. Whatever the nature of reality, my life runs in parallel to the echoes of different outcomes of that shooting. Those where I'm killed, those where I'm injured, those where 12-year-old me experiences the worst kind of violence firsthand, Jeremy, Eddie Vedder. Beyond my own life, in the reality where the gun didn't jam, this particular moment in history would have had profound effects on the history of this country. The shooting, 9 years before Columbine, was motivated by racial tensions. The shooter was the only black boy in school. He'd been teased mercilessly by a racist bully straight out of The Karate Kid. Worse. The recent Parkland shooting was especially resonant for me. The shooter's name was Nicholas, just like my school's shooter, and the bully called Nicholas Nigger Lips. The teachers did nothing about it. This was Virginia in the late 80s. Had the gun not jammed, the death toll would have been very high. But the shooting wasn't noticed. This was before the 24-hour news cycles. Before the racial aspect, this happened at a small conservative evangelical school 2 miles away from the broadcasting empire of Pat Robertson, founder of the Christian Broadcasting Network, or the Christian Broadcasting Network, the precursor to Fox News, and a cornerstone of the most monolithic and perhaps influential political base in this country. My father worked for him, as did many of the parents of the kids at my school. On top of that, Virginia Beach lies in the heart of what is effectively the largest and most influential military installation in the world. I don't know how the world would be different if a dozen or dozens of kids died that day in 1988, but there's no doubt that it would be. One's connection to other possible realities affect us, whether there's a quantum connection or just our imagination of the narrowly avoided realities or those realities that exist outside ours. I think Some of us who've had this particular kind of experience can sense the possibility of certain big events coming in our gut, so to speak, like dogs before an earthquake. In May of 2016, I kept seeing a series of interconnected dates and stories and ideas that were pushing me to a couple of dates in June 10th and June 19th, 2016, over and over again. We were 6 months past the Paris attacks. That remains the largest mass shooting in the Western world. You may remember Pray for Paris. The hashtag had died down by May, but I started thinking about it all the time. You don't have to take my word for it. On May 4th, 2016, and I'll put this link below, I wrote about my premonition. It's the only time I've ever done this. I've had feelings. You remember feelings, you don't. Confirmation bias. This is the only time I've ever written it down and said I think something is going to happen. In the middle of the night on June 12th, I awoke bolt upright in bed with a vision of a nuclear explosion and an unmistakable thought, this is real. It was a knowing. I almost never remember my dreams. That morning I woke up to the news of the Orlando shooting, a Paris-style attack that became at the time the largest mass shooting in United States history. I had literally awoken during the shooting. Obviously I can't prove it, but I do have friends who were there in the morning. But that's not all, not nearly. That was the section of the script that I had written. And I have a screenshot of where my script was just a couple of weeks ago. I was writing about this story as part of the script. I was fighting with myself how or if to include the story I just told, because there eventually comes around. Knowing how negatively a lot of people would react, I knew this is especially, 2+ hours into this video. So I closed the laptop. I went inside. I closed the laptop. I have to tell the story for people who haven't heard it yet. So after I wrote that part of the script, I closed my laptop and I recorded a little video, realizing, oh my God, this thing is long. I'm never going to get it done. I told people I'd have it done by today. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to do some of it and then I'm going to do the rest live, basically describing a version of what's going on now. I went inside, picked up my phone, and I saw the headline, shots fired at Twin Peaks restaurant in Odessa, Texas. And, obviously, if you're with me this far in this video, you know the fundamental part of Odessa, Texas is that it's the place between worlds, between our world and the world of Twin Peaks. That's what it represents, all the things in Odessa. And then, all of the stuff in Carrie Page's house, there's this, one of the other things in the house that really the only thing that doesn't have a specific meaning to Twin Peaks. It's the only thing in this room that to that point 2 weeks ago I did not have an explanation for specifically. The assault rifle right here, which of course was the kind of weapon used when 7 people were killed in Odessa, Texas a few weeks ago. Pretty weird. But the thing is, this is far from the first time such a connection had happened for me with Twin Peaks, you see, because in The Return, episode 3, the shot passes by a bunch of things right in the scene where Gordon Coles introduces the scene before they stand in front of the blackboard with the nuclear explosion. And that gun is a Mac 11. Not a Mac 10, a Mac 11. That is the gun that my school shooter used in 1988 in my school shooting. That jammed. It has a suppressor on it, which his didn't, but the Virginia Beach shooting, same city, 30 years later, earlier this year, the thing that made that shooting different than all the other mass shootings was that it used a suppressor. Yeah, I am starting to see through the Matrix. But the thing is, some people can, just think these are coincidences. And the thing is, the date, the premonition date that I had, June 10th, 2016, it's a palindrome, 6102016. I picked 91919 on purpose at 9:19 p.m. I didn't have a vision of that. I just thought, ooh, hey, another palindrome. But 6102016 was a perfect palindrome. And there were all of these different things that were leading me to the date. The sign, I had a signed copy, first edition of the book Contact, where it was exactly 30 years to the day that Carl Sagan had signed it. I gave it to my girlfriend. So many things. My dad's 76th birthday. It was only after the fact, like last year as I was making this video, I found out that was also the 25th anniversary of the series finale of Twin Peaks. In other words, that was the exact day, that was 25 years to the day that Laura Palmer said, "I'll see you again in 25 years." And this is far, and it just keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening, and I'm scared. I'm scared. Like, what does this mean? Like, at what point do people like my family who are Southern evangelicals who believe in weird stuff, but only in the framework of, you know, their Zeus-like storybook Disney version of God, who can somehow support Donald Trump, even though he clearly is against everything they say they stand for and is an outright liar. And again, it's not Republicans or conservatives. I voted for none of the above. I went to the polls in 2016. I had a breakdown after all of this in 2016. I went to the polls and I wrote none of the above. You can see it on my Instagram. I'm not left or right. I think everybody's messed up right now. But, and for everything on the right, the left has some really weird stuff going on. You talk Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, they have the connection to Marina Abramovich. There's weird stuff. And I worked in the media. I worked in the local news, like in Twin Peaks, just little things. Like it's KQRY. When you first look at it, it looks like KORY. Like my name, Corey, Mr. C. My name is, like my hair. I didn't mean to do it. It's just when I went to do this part 2, I like have the Mr. C hair. It's all terrifying to me. But I can like just step back and say, okay, well, it's the synchronicity. What does it mean? What do you want to do with it? Because it is sort of the meaning that you make out of it. I'm trying somehow to get my conservative family to see that there are other ways to see all of this, but if they can see it in a second, they'll get this kind of nausea when they see what they've been missing by blocking this out. I've been saying over and over, we're Sarah Palmer, but my mother is Sarah Palmer quite literally. The school shooting is not my only form of PTSD. My mother, when we were growing up, put us in constant situations where we had the potential to be sexually abused. My sister, who has an Audrey tattoo on her calf, which I'm sure she had no idea until now, was definitely abused. And I think I was too. I have latent memories of that. But just, you can track it back to everywhere my mother went. She was literally drawn to it. And in the same way that I look into Twin Peaks, I looked into my family history, and it's pretty apparent that my grandfather was almost certainly a molester, if not my mother, probably one of her sister, who lived a life that looked just like Sarah Palmer with the cigarettes all out there, and that was my aunt who's passed on. But it's these secrets that are creating the dreamers in our real life, and that's kind of the point of everything I'm kind of trying to get to. There's different levels of dreamers, right? Like you've got people like my mother who, going into the 2016 election, whatever your politics, I'm not saying Republicans, I'm just talking about Donald Trump. When I looked into my mother's eyes, and I was like, everything, we were raised strict, conservative, Christian household, all of the things they told us were important. I'm like, this guy is this, and really? And there's just this sort of like glaze over in the eyes. And there is a societal disassociation going on. It's not just the left, it's not just the right, it's not atheists, it's all of us. And I think that's what I've seen. I've seen the potential of this moment, and my God, it is not just Twin Peaks. The new show that's on Amazon, I just watched 2 episodes of it. I can't even, Undone. Good Omens, Undone, they're all telling the same story. Avengers Endgame. That's another one, by the way. I started writing Endgame on my Instagram. You go look, at Corey TV on Instagram. I started writing Endgame on my Instagram 2 months before they announced the name of the final Avengers movie. I have a little bit of the touch. I just do. And it's scary to say, but there are the people who've been through traumas have it, and all this stuff, the secret societies. The thing that I'm gonna reread this thing that I wrote. I read it in my other video today, but this should be able to stand alone. Oh no, wrong keyboard. I wrote this thing on Reddit, and I spent a lot of time in the conspiracy subreddit, and it's not that I'm kind of the firm belief that, and this is so timely, I've been talking about so much stuff before it happened that my family refuses to give me credit for. Russia, Saudi Arabia. I talked to Edward Snowden in 2016 and asked him a question that was downright prophetic for something that happened in December 2016, and the people around me cannot see that I have done this because of what it would mean to not just reality and our relationships, but how they've treated me in the past. And look, no one has treated people worse than I have, so it's not like that. It's been a heck of a journey, but I want to read this thing that I wrote, and I read it in the other video, but this one should stand on its own. So, what I think is happening is an apocalypse, like straight up. Revelation in the Bible is a metaphor for a kind of apocalypse, which is human evolution. And the show Undone on Amazon, I mean, it's like I feel like I wrote it. And it's meta for me to say that. And I don't want to say any more in case you want to go watch it, because I don't want to spoil it. It's easy to watch and talks about some of the things that a lot of people like me are feeling right now. Someone had asked the conspiracy subreddit. So the conspiracies I believe in, I don't think that 9/11 was this huge planned thing. I just want to know why 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian. All this stuff is happening with Saudi Arabia now, and nobody can talk about Saudi Arabia. It sure seems like they sure do have us by the balls. A lot of stuff about that. So that's the kind of conspiracy I believe in. I think that there's these obvious conspiracies hiding in plain sight, and everyone's talking about directed energy weapons, and it's all a plan, and da-da-da. Dude, what? Just Saudi Arabia did 9/11. Why don't we ever talk about it? Our entire geopolitical hell that we're in is based on 9/11, and we don't even talk about who obviously caused it. Like, this isn't even... It's not even a question. The press can't talk about it. No one can talk about it, and I don't understand why. I mean, I do. It's Sarah Palmer. We're all Sarah Palmer. So someone in the conspiracy subreddit had written, why does everything feel weird? Why does it feel like everything is a remix? And here's, a lot of this, my theory in 2012 had to do with mixing quantum physics and Jungian personality archetypes. That was my light bulb moment. It was like, oh, I can take this metaphor of the particle and the wave, which is paradoxical, but apply it in sort of a binary way to the Myers-Briggs archetypes, which are based on Jungian archetypes. And then my brain went left and I had a metanoia. And if you read Philip K. Dick, he talks about you can't have a metanoia without having psychosis. That's what happened to me. So I've kind of like gone through this journey, but now that I'm on the other side, the world seems like it's blowing up. And I think you need a lot of people like me, not just me, but we are pushed down into corners and told there is something wrong with our brains and that we're sick. And that's wrong. Watch Undone, for crying out loud. Anyway, people are archetypes. Once you see it and it goes beyond a picture, let me start over. People are archetypes. Once you see it, and it goes beyond a picture, there's an energy to it. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. In a weird way, we're all the small number of people interacting with each other over and over again through time. We're a hive mind, and we always have been, no different than a flock of birds or a bunch of cows that face the same direction automatically. It's just that our behavior is more complicated and more subtle. But Pandora's box has already been opened. It's quantum in nature, and more people are awakening to various aspects about the true nature of reality. Different people have known different aspects of this high weirdness for all of recorded history, but each civilization rewrites the myths and explanations. Now, however, we are able to see patterns in the whole, and I think it's likely some of this stuff has been weaponized for quite some time. Quantum mechanics really links everything together, and we're at a stage of evolution right at the edge of it, and that's why everything feels weird. The whole universe is a brain. Each of us is a self-aware synapse. It's hard to unsee once you see it. Everything is patterns of patterns of patterns. This is a dangerous time. It could be great. It could be the end of everything. I have a feeling that in the end our planet, probably our entire universe, is just a single bit in a binary computer of an infinity of other universes. It's just that all the subcalculation within that single binary bit, the particle and the wave, happens over what we perceive as billions and billions of years. It's that simple and that impossible to understand because so many people bring so many biases, and at the end of the day can't begin to comprehend this. There are those whose function is supposed to be to explain and govern this shit, but they've hidden it or used it unfairly for so long the truth cannot come out because there are probably some terrible things that have been hidden. But we're up against a wall because the underlying mechanism itself can be harnessed in certain technical ways, probably, and what we're facing is a world where all these secrets are being used as leverage for control. But if somebody doesn't do something quickly, some entity, define that word as you like, is going to gain something approaching absolute control. And because nothing is not time and we are becoming aware of the multidimensional way we see time, the veil is falling. Good news, there's an opportunity to rewrite everything. Bad news, some people have a really selfish way they want to rewrite everything. Machine learning, that's the scary part. Feed a certain kind of machine all the philosophy, physics, sacred geometry, religion, occult, etc., and suddenly the thing sees patterns and starts writing a new way of understanding it. And that kind of stuff is effectively brainless machines, controlled by certain kinds of people. But whatever, nobody listens to me. So all of this does come together. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Forget about me for a second. It's not about me. This is just the sort of pattern that I see. If like I feel like what I've done at this point is I have done this marathon to say, hey, see all these patterns I found in Twin Peaks? What if that guy with that brain turned it on the outside world? What patterns could that guy put together? And this is a question. I'm not saying this is definitively what's happening, but I think this is what's happening. I think secret society has been around a long time and they know a lot of stuff. From my personal experience, there's a giant percentage of the population who can't follow me to step 1, let alone step 10. I think people over time who speak a certain kind of smart talk create their own little groups, and they, by their very nature, understand things about reality that other people haven't, and they pass these secrets on. And there's different sects, it's like the Vatican is the version of that for the Catholic Church, or maybe, there's many secret societies, OTO, Freemasons, and a lot of that is in the secret history. But the thing is, all of these people know the same things, but it's not just like, ooh, science secrets. They do really sick rituals to try and manipulate quantum realities. I think that child sacrifice and blood magic and sex magic is different ways of trying to shape quantum probabilities and create these kind of breaks in people on purpose. I've definitely gone through a paranoia hole myself, wondering, there's this same scene, right next to what's right next to the gun. Let's have a look over here. Okay, little boy in a Navy suit on a beach. Well, it turns out when I was a kid, my family was plucked up from New York City to come here to Virginia Beach, the home of the largest Navy outfit in the world, where my life turned upside down and I had a mass shooting a couple years later. And if you look at all the things about MK Ultra, it's like that's what beta training and theta training all is. And I've had to ask myself, am I part of some government project? But thinking about that and being fixated on that will only make you paranoid and terrified. I just think that it's hilarious that that's next to the gun. And it's a beach, for crying out loud. I have to go through this phase of wondering, is me doing this part of how I'm being manipulated? But this is what's known as Chapel Perilous, if you look it up, or the Long Dark Night of the Soul. And the first time I was going through this in 2016, and there was this support group of people who kind of understood what I was going through, and I was really freaking out one day. Someone sent me the Twin Peaks theme. It was like a year before the returns. Like, just listen to this, it'll calm you. They had no idea I was a Twin Peaks fan from being a kid. But I think there is something here. I think there is a story about secrets. And I told you before I talked to Edward Snowden, but basically at Johns Hopkins in 2016, he just came out with a book this week, right? In 2016, out of everyone in the thousands of people with PhDs and, people from special guests from all over, they picked me to ask a question of Snowden. And I asked him about secrets. It was specific. I won't go into the long version right now, but I basically asked him, do we live in a world of too many secrets? And he dodged my question. Like, I came back and asked it again. He was like, well, that's why encryption is important. And I was like, what? And then the specific question I asked had a very specific payoff in December. Like, the very thing I asked about happened at a very important time in human history. And nothing. Like, it's just, it feels Kafkaesque. It feels like I'm stuck in some crazy world where I'm stuck in some cell and nobody sees it. But I'm okay now. It's just I don't know where to go from here. And that's what this comes down to. I think if we read the tea leaves, there's a lot of secrets out there and some really weird stuff that some people know and some people don't. Some of it is just secrets they have on each other. All this Jeffrey Epstein, are you kidding me? The Jeffrey Epstein thing? Every single investigative journalist in the world should be all over that. And it's just kind of like gone by the wayside and everyone's distracted by Trump's latest shenanigans. And we're at the brink of war. We've got Saudi Arabia and all this stuff right now. And I think this is the problem. And there's the question of, do we wake the dreamer? Is there a way to stay in this dream? Because it seems like it's kind of a nightmare for some of us now. And I think what the Bohemian Grove is, sure, they may not talk about business deals, but it's the most influential people in the world coming together and putting their probability views in sync. They get together in these groups, they share drinks and bacteria, and they connect in this physical sense, and together those people move the world. That's what the Illuminati is. And it's been very male-dominated up to this point. The Secret History talks about Jack Parsons, who was the guy who created Jet Propulsion's laboratory and his relationship with Aleister Crowley and magic and the occult. That's actually where the White Lodge and the Black Lodge came from. A book by Aleister Crowley called The Moonchild. So the whole thing with Laura Palmer potentially being a Moonchild type savior or antichrist. There's these archetypes. Babylon, the Scarlet Woman. Jack Parsons, who basically made nuclear missiles and going to the moon possible, got together with these Thelemites and did, sex magic in the desert to try and summon an elemental, very much like the Experiment. I think the whole deal with the Experiment in Twin Peaks, the bomb, the bug coming out of the sand, it's related to this Babylon working. And I think what we're seeing, I talked a lot about the sacred masculine, sacred feminine, particle in the wave. I think there are basically good and bad versions of both. Like, you have the mother and father archetypes on the positive, and then you have the Bob and the Experiment on the negative. And I think what we need as a planet is much more feminine energy, much more caring, much more love, much more compassion, much more concern for the whole. We need the sacred feminine. What we don't need to do is unleash the demon on the world of chaos, the Red Woman, the Scarlet Woman. And I think that these things are expressions, that they're metaphors for something that underlies something very basic. That the people who understand these things in simple metaphors see as comic book characters, like superheroes. But you know what superheroes are? They're people with freaking mental disorders. Superheroes are bipolar people, because when you're bipolar, you get special powers. It's that extra level of myth in the Greek myths, in the comic book stories, in the Bible. And the people of my mother's ilk are stuck thinking Marvel comic versions are literally true. Not understanding that there's some mystery and magic underneath of that they're missing out on because they believe in the real Iron Man versus the metaphorical Iron Man. And we could talk about all of the ramifications of all of this, but I think I've kind of covered it. And I think what you're seeing is the sacred feminine crashing through this barrier that's been put there by all of the Bob energy in the world. And it's, I was a Dougie Jones, man. This is why it feeds back for me. This is how it all comes back to Twin Peaks. I was so messed up with sex because of my experiences when I was younger and the way my mother talked about it, and she lied and said she and my dad were virgins until after they were married, and it just makes you feel guilty and terrible and all this stuff. But here's the thing, in a traumatic part of my life, which was also like the peak of my sexual development, they let me watch Twin Peaks that's full of hookers and stuff like that, so I kind of became a little fixated on hookers. I lost my virginity to a hooker. I don't feel bad about it anymore. I was guilty for years, and it caught, I eventually, during my breakdown in 2012, my metanoia, I admitted all of this to my now ex-wife. And once you admit that kind of thing and you're diagnosed with a mental illness, nothing you ever say can be right ever again. And when you're the kind of person who's saying, yeah, I kind of can see the future, it doesn't go well for you. And I've been angry and desperate and tired for so long, and I'm at the end of my rope. I really am. I'm just like, I'm at a friend's house, I can't work. I'm trying to escape the largest military installation in the world. I feel like they have me captive when I'm being paranoid, but I realize it's, I put myself here. But it's not easy to deal with the past. It's not easy to deal with the secrets that underlie it. I don't know how you survive the realization that your father may have been molesting you, because I don't think my dad did. I should be clear about that. The molestation happened outside of my family. But, I'm certainly not a perfect human in any respect, but I'm much better than I was. And having that metanoia is the same thing as Christians describe in being saved. It's a quantum interaction. We don't, it's a bell curve. We don't go to infinity. Some of us are more alive than dead. And I, for the longest time, have been more dead than alive from the time I was a kid. I keep trying to break through, and it's a probability quantum bell curve thing, and I can just see the shape of this whole thing. And when you put yourself on a centered path, meditation, blah, 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 you're putting yourself on the best possible trajectory. It's a balance. It's about the people you know. It's about the choices that you make. It's the point of morality is to stay in the center of that bell curve, right? And I can't. It's not, it is, yeah, sure, it's my feelings, but I'm stuck in hell. I mean, Hampton Roads, Virginia is hell because everybody here has to be Sarah Palmer, because this all has to be for something. If they go to the Middle East and fight for the petrodollar or whatever, fucked up with Saudi Arabia dictating what we should do, everyone around here has to believe they're doing the good. And it's a special, terrifying place in the world. Everyone's good people to their community. Good. You will not find people who care for their community more than Southeastern Virginia, Hampton Roads. It just happens to be the biggest military base in the world. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, NSA, CIA. The CIA farm is here. It is the #1 tactical nuclear target in the world. And I think I feel that in a quantum sense. And I think I've felt it for some time. And more than anything, I'm freaking out because we have idiots running the country who aren't brave, who are cowards, who are small, who can't say the things that need to be said, who are stupid, who abuse those around them, who put people in boxes, who just want to speak the truth. All the news stories are reflecting the things that I'm saying and have been saying for 7 years. People have seen me angry and desperate and scared, and I don't understand now why they can't see how I was. This was the point, to get right here. I've done everything I can possibly do. I don't need to make this video, I made it. If someone else wants to take all of my ideas, they're yours. You want to ask me questions about how all this fits together? Great. You want to help me? Don't say get help. You should see the idiot that the therapists that he doesn't know how to follow me. He doesn't understand a thing I'm saying. He's a nice guy. Get me on the fucking Joe Rogan show. You want to help me? Let me talk to Joe Rogan. He liked Twin Peaks. Someone send him a link. The thing in Twin Peaks where Log Lady Margaret says in her last conversation, remember the conversations we had in person, not over the phone. There's something real there. There's a quantum effect that's going on with our everything being recorded. It's something about your heritage. You know that old Native American thing about not wanting their pictures taken? There's quantum ramifications for that. When you take pictures, it holds that reality in a frame of silver, of metal, silver halides on a piece of paper. That where that picture exists, that reality must have been reality. So I'm saying maybe the Native Americans were onto something because they understood that anything that got you to that point, did your friend take path A or path B to get to pick you up? If every moment of that person's path is recorded and put onto a singular internet, then all of our realities are crushing in together. And this time loop that Twin Peaks shows, and shows like Legion are showing, is the collective unconscious responding to this. I don't think there are people who've created a AI to control us all yet, but we're creating it by accident. We're creating a data set of absolutely everything we do at all times. Is it necessarily bad? No. It just seems dangerous to be doing it without having this particular conversation. Morality, quantum physics, AI, we are at this moment of evolution. And now, questions from the audience. Fixating on Joe Rogan's not healthy. I'm not fixating on Joe Rogan, dude. I'm just saying, get me out of here. Do you have a job for me? You got some work? Got a place I can live that's not... I'm just like, just get me on Joe Rogan. Let me have a conversation. Somebody will hear me. It's millions of people listen to that. Dude, I was talking about deepfakes 3 years before Joe Rogan. I'm just saying he knows how to say it to a big audience. I've got 24 concurrent viewers. It's a difference. Thank you, though. I don't fixate on Joe Rogan. That's actually almost a reference from my sister, who, when in 2016 I was saying, nobody's talking about these things. She's like, well, Joe Rogan is, and she didn't understand. She didn't understand the depth of what I was trying to communicate. Poorly, but, Okay. Anybody questions? Final serious. Dude, I know Robert Anton Wilson. Are you kidding me? I skim that stuff, but Robert Anton Wilson saved my life at one point. First, there is no Illuminati. Then there is Illuminati. Then there is no Illuminati. The true meaning of agnosticism I learned from Robert Anton Wilson. Let's see. Mental positive guide. Self-experience and things. The thing is, there are millions of books and things I can read that will help me deal with this. I need practical, everyday, get me out of here help. Okay? You don't understand the situation. They don't like people like me around here. The military hive mind, it's everybody is robot, help. There's only so much meditation will do for me, The machine shop running a cylindrical lathe. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I can work in a place that's not fun. I just need to be surrounded by people who get me, and in a part of the country where I'm not terrified for my life. I don't want to be part of this machine. It invades absolutely everything about this area, and the thing required in your brain to turn off reality and just say yes sir and follow the President of the United States and take the military money. This entire place is run 100% on military money and all of the things that follow the military money. In order to do that, you can't question any of it, and people who have succeeded in that model have created a structure in their brain that abuses people like me. It just does. They just shut you down in different ways. It's bad. Good people in their personal lives to people who are like them, fine. Let's see what else. Okay. It was Costa Rica, and it was a desperate attempt and a guy who was a real scumbag who used me. Like, there were days where after 1 week without speaking a word of Spanish, he left me, and then without 2 weeks, that was Costa Rica. After 2 weeks, the only guy who was there to help was gone. I was by myself, running a jungle treehouse, cooking breakfast. It was a great experience for a little bit, but there were days where I didn't have food. It was terrifying. I would be okay working in media or production as part of a team. I don't like being stuck in a room churning out content, writing, directing, editing, shooting, being the person on camera. It drives you crazy. In 10 years, we're going to have a total mental health crisis. All of these people who've been forced in these little bubbles of creation, just nonstop creation, who are way medicated on Adderall and all of these things. I would take all sorts of jobs where I could just make a get-along living in a nice part of the country, or in a perfect world, collaborating with people to work on these messages, but it has to be done in person. I need someone standing with me on screen who together we can, you know, take messages forward, and it's a real life collaboration. When I started in this industry, editing was a 2-person thing. 3 people were in the room editing. Now it's just like you go off, do everything by yourself, and I need human interaction. So there's that. Anyone else? Any other questions? Yes, we are reaching peak absurdity. Yes, I don't go to, so 420 Protoman says chaos magic contains a set of techniques for deliberately engineering synchronicities. Yeah, I think that's dangerous. All of these things are different worldviews and ways of trying to program quantum reality, whether it's just old-fashioned religion or business, secret societies, or chaos magic. I think some people who understand chaos magic have been using it to manipulate some scary things. And I don't go too far down any occult rabbit hole. I don't judge about any of it, but I do know that my sense is that there are some very dark pathways, and I tend to sort of see the thing all holistically, and I think there's good and bad in almost every worldview. But chaos magic feels very real to me, and for that reason, I don't want to go too far down that. It seems, for a person like me, that would be dangerous. But I understand that it's something that a brain like mine could do. And I think that I probably have put myself in a position of being influenced by people who call themselves chaos magicians by not playing their game. I would love to move to Canada. Can you get me to Canada? I would love, man, I loved Montreal. God, I would love to move. Do you have a place for me? I'll crash on your couch. Is that legal? I don't know. Please. Yes, I would absolutely move to Canada in a heartbeat. Any other questions? Saying the Mac 11.u is not lost on me. I didn't do that on purpose. Synchromysticism. Yeah, I see where you're coming through from 420 Protoman. Oh, hey, let's talk about weed for a second. I haven't smoked weed in a while now. I am generally pro-weed. However, I think it really does. I think that's the whole gig with Jerry in The Return, is that you can go too far down that rabbit hole. I think it's something that should be used for ritual and preferably with other people. I think smoking the peace pipe was weed. And I think that, as a matter of fact, one of my theories is that the Owl Cave ring symbolizes different things in the secret history, and the whole thing with Lewis and Clark and the meeting the Indians and all of that. I think it's possible that there's something to do with weed and the Owl Cave ring, because it is a way to get into other worlds. And there's a reason that people call it the devil weed. It's a risk. It's not 100% good. And there are 2 chemicals in it, CBD and THC, one of which allows you to see more and the other relaxes you, but whatever you bring to it can do different things. I would love to be in a place that I could get organic weed, where I could pick exactly which strain I was going for and get the dosage and all of that. But I live in the biggest military base in the world. I can't get. They just legalized CBD, kind of. Same thing with psychedelics. I think there's people who go way too far down that rabbit hole. For the record, I've tried DMT twice, LSD once, mushrooms twice. I've never really broken through. I have a very high tolerance for chemicals. I started drinking lots and lots of coffee when I was young, and I've never really broken through, but I've had mild experiences on those. Yes, then came the Odessa shooting. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like, and I still haven't gone over all the beats. Like, okay, so here's another one. As I was finishing the first video, it certainly wasn't the ordeal this was. It was a 12-minute video. This was what, 2 hours? 3? Without chemical Z points. Yeah, absolutely. I've thought about that. And when I left the TV news station last year, I was hoping to be able to get off of the psychological meds and stuff, and that did not go well for me. Probably had too much weed at the same time in a crazy relationship. But yeah, without chemical Z points. Like, if you can get centered and completely straight edge, there is a clarity that comes with that, absolutely. So when I was finishing up the video last year, I just had this profound moment of synchronicity. I was just, a friend was like, hey, do you want to go to the mountains of West Virginia with me? You can stay at my cabin. I was like, yeah, cool. I got there a night before, and I brought my laptop and my hard drive to finish last year's video. And I didn't even know where I was going to stay. I was going with my kid, and so I got a place that had, you know, separate bedrooms for each of us. And I just got the closest, cheapest one I could find that met those, and I didn't really even look where I was going. And so I show up at the place. It turns out it's on the top of a mountain. It's on top of Snowshoe Mountain in West Virginia. And it was 10 snowshoe place. And I don't have the pictures of it now, but like it looked like the freaking Great Northern, like exactly like the Great Northern. And this was between June 10th and June 19th, but you know, last year. And on June 10th was the day that I'd really connected the Audrey dance in the 3rd episode and Audrey's dance in the 16th of the Return. And I wrote on Facebook, I'm Charlie Bucket. And then I get up there and they have their free movie of the night. Not only were they playing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, it was reversed. Like the video was reversed. It was so perfect. There were so many other things like that just were happening. Boom, 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 synchronicity, synchronicity. And I have pictures of all this stuff, but when you experience synchronicity, it's really hard to relate. But I've got a few pictures from that day. It's almost like the Odessa shooting. I'm like, I can put it together, and that would raise an eyebrow or two. But anytime I've fallen into this Twin Peaks flow, it just happens. Like, it's hard for me to kind of get over this Saudi Arabia stuff, because anybody who knows me has been hearing me talk nonstop about Saudi Arabia and how weird this stuff is. It's like been my #1 cause. I made this graphic in 2016 with Trump and Clinton and this little thing of Trump blowing up the. It's hard to explain, but anyway, that's sigil magic. I mean, I wasn't intending it to be that way, but art is sigil magic, Mr. Chaos. You know what I'm talking about. That's how it works. All right, I think that's it, right? No more questions? Any last questions before we call it a night? Hey, 3 hours. Could have been worse. Yeah, so don't expect another video anytime soon. I feel, having gone through this, I did about as well as I can do. And I had been saying that I think this is something that can be done live. Feel free, anyone, to chop this up, use bits of it. It would be nice if I got attribution. Yeah, right, only 3 hours. Hey, you want to send me money? PayPal me at therealitywar@gmail.com. Contact me, therealitywar@gmail.com. Heck, if you got all the way to here, please email me. Any thoughts? I would love to hear it. There's 22 people watching, probably really only like 18. Yeah, please, let me know what you think. Any ideas, leads on a job? I'm pretty desperate. I've kind of got to get out of this place and I have nowhere to go. I'm sort of just throwing myself onto the edge of this. And I could be homeless in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, don't really have time to finish the video. I think like this pretty much did what I needed to. Hey, invite me to your house. You're a big Twin Peaks fan. Got a room in a month. I'll set up a computer and we'll finish the awesome version together. But I need a collaborator. I can't be in a room. I'm so alone. So, anyway. Yeah, thanks everyone. Yeah. Thanks, you guys. You're awesome. End your stream. That's a little terrifying, really. End your stream. Stream over.